Hi. This is Novel Admire. Welcome to my channel. Have fun. Fog, Esports. Chapter 1. It was 2 o'clock in the morning and the lights in the Yaoi Sports Club Fog Division in Shanghai were still bright. The practice match just ended, and it was free time now. The players in the base were washing up and ordering takeaway. There was only one person left in the training room, Shi Luo, who was in his seat playing the game. It wasn't that Shi Luo was diligent, but it was the end of the month and he still owed more than 20 hours of live broadcast time to fulfill the terms of his contract. Shi Luo, account name, Evil, 19 years old, young, skilled, unfortunately quite handsome. 2 years after his debut, he was one of the domestic league's top-tier gaming celebrities. He was the poster boy for the Yaoi team, their cash cow and their pillar. The celebrity himself, though, didn't like doing live broadcasts. But according to his contract, he had to do at least 30 hours of live broadcast a month. So, barring any incident, at least 29 hours of those would be broadcasted at the end of the month. Just after the practice match ended, the club manager called again. Shi Luo couldn't put it off any longer and he finally started to make up work. Only 2 or 3 minutes after the live broadcast started, Shi Luo's live broadcast room had more than 3 million viewers. The barrage was densely packed, and they had overlapped over one another until it was almost impossible to make them out. I'd been expecting this broadcast, hhhhhhhhhh. Ha 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 ha, it's that beautiful time of the month when Shishin is forced to open business. It's the 29th already, there's not much time left for Shi Luo Xuanzu. It's the 29th already, there's not much time left for Shi Luo Xuanzu. +1, the end of each month is when my husband accompanies me day and night. Just as I thought. Husband, you'll keep me company for the next 25 hours, right? Are you happy? Are you? Look here. Look here. Look here. After the preseason matches next month, it's going to be the transfer period. Is my husband still going to be at Yaoi next season? Will you be transferring this year? Yes, it's time for the annual transfer again. They said all the teams would be making some pretty big moves this year. I'm waiting for that big shakeup in the league. Yaoi's boss's heart isn't on the game at all. He only wants to make money. He'll only hold back the team. My husband, the earlier you transfer, the earlier we can rest assured. Asking for a transfer. Stop with the speculations. Every year, everyone goes crazy during the transfer period. Just calm down, alright? Near the transfer period, the esports fans would all be in an unstable mood, and an argument inexplicably broke out in the barrage. However, Shi Luo wasn't the single bit affected. After all, he hadn't opened the barrage interface. Shi Luo opened the Fog game client, logged into his site account and waited. After a short while, he entered the game. Fog, the domestic translation for within the Fog, it has been 6 years since its public beta, and its popularity has only increased year by year. It was now ranked top 3 among the world's most popular games. Fog is a 4-on-4 confrontation game. In each game, the player and his teammates would be placed on one end of a map covered in dense fog. At the other end of the map would be their 4 opponents. Players have different abilities and tasks depending on their jobs. The ultimate goal is to clear away the fog on the other side of the map, leaving your opponents nowhere to hide. Then the team that kills all their opponents and destroys the opponent's resurrection stone first, wins. Each team of players consists of 3 jobs and #K2014, 2 strikers, 1 sniper, and 1 medic. Shi Luo played as a striker. As the name suggests, his role was to charge to the front and attack. Shi Luo was used to playing a side account whenever he did live broadcasts. He hadn't played this side account much this season and its rank was very low. Naturally, the level of his teammates that the system matched with him was average. Shi Luo was completely indifferent. Run-of-the-mill players could rarely keep up with his rhythm and he was used to soloing matches. So long as his teammates weren't completely terrible, they'd win. And if they were in #K 2026, then he'll just take it as training. Such as this match. The other striker in the team opened the match by letting the other team take his head. He had completely no awareness of his movements, and he shot haphazardly, exposing his position. Less than 10 minutes into the game and hadn't contributed even half a point. What's more, he gave up 3 heads to their opponents. In low-level matches, he would often be matched with some endearingly silly teammates. Shi Luo didn't care. In this match, he had already gotten 2 heads from their opponents. He had upgraded and he could do this 1v4. But his pig teammate who'd handed over his head, clearly didn't have such a good mentality. After dying for the 4th time, he started to idle and type out curses in the team chat. Thief fierce, thief strong, medic, what's going on? Are you sleepwalking? You're not providing cover with that photon shield and you're not adding blood. Then why are you even here? Thief fierce, thief strong, you can see I'm taking hits here, why aren't you helping? What are you playing? If you can't play then leave. Just FCK off. Thief fierce, thief strong, why are all these stupid CNTs who can't get points playing medics now? What? You're just gonna leech off some points? Shi Luo was in a 1v2 face-off. After killing the opposing team, he glanced at the team chat. Even his spraying was subpar. Although the team's medic wasn't all that sharp, he was a lot stronger than this piss-poor shit of a striker. Thief fierce, thief strong. The shield cover he'd given Shi Luo just now was very timely. There weren't any problems. The medic was probably young or good-tempered, and he'd been insulted for a long time before typing to say, I'm not just muddling along, I was helping the other striker just now. One stone set off 1,000 waves. The piss-poor striker was provoked and the team chat started beeping non-stop. Thief fierce, thief strong, you can only assist one striker? Do you only have one hand? Are you handicapped? Thief fierce, thief strong, do you know how to play or not? If you can't play, can't you just stop digging pits for your teammates? Thief fierce, thief strong, you're a f-king CNT. If you think I'm going to give you 3 points then think again. This guy was shit at playing the game but he typed pretty fast. The medic didn't seem like the type to scold people and after typing out a few sentences to explain himself, didn't type again. Shi Luo looked at the team chat interface, paused his movements, and in the end, typed nothing. That's why he didn't like doing live broadcasts. Opening a live broadcast would take up network speed and it would influence his operation, that's a given. But the most annoying thing about doing live broadcasts was that the league had regulations that stated that active professional players mustn't display any negative behavior in the game, including but not limited to trash talking or spraying other players. So many people watched during the live broadcasts and the chat records served as irrefutable evidence. Getting penalized was a matter of course. It wasn't worth being penalized for something like this. Shi Luo upgraded his equipment and continued to charge forward alone. This thief fierce, thief strong saw that no one was paying him any attention and threw in angrily, damn it, I met 3 useless medics in one night and lost 3 matches in a row. All these medic players are stupid ass peaches. Stupid ass peaches. The chat notification beeped, and Shi Luo narrowed his eyes at the chat interface. After a second, he pushed the mouse aside and started typing. Beginning with Shi Luo's first sentence, don't insult the medic. Come on, let us two have a contest. The barrage in the live broadcast room went crazy. PFFT, I knew he wouldn't be able to help it. You think the no one sprayer in the country in those days is playing a joke on you? After playing professionally for a few years, you think he's forgotten how to insult people? A spraying contest with evil. Is he looking to die? No one can out-trash talk him, hi 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 ha. This person's ability to set off mines is amazing. Don't you know that Shi Shin's first in-game occupation was a medic? How can he tolerate insults to medics? Ha ha ha. Shi Luo's using a side account, And this guy has no idea that this is Shi Luo. It's been a long time since I saw the little master's artful spraying, I've missed it a lot. Look at that pro gamer hand speed, look at this huge vocabulary, and look at his flexible use of obscenities. Feels so good. Aren't professional players not allowed to trash talk other players? Isn't he afraid of being penalized? There'll definitely be a penalty. Just wait for the announcement on the club's official blog. That's 10,000 yuan down the drain. My god, he's still raining down abuse? What's with this hand speed hhhhhh? Shi Luo was expressionless as his fingers flew across the keyboard. The penalty wasn't based on the number of insults. One insult had a fine of 10,000. 100 insults also had a fine of 10,000. In any case, this 10,000 yuan was as good as gone, so why not curse this little shd some more? This fierce thief strong obviously couldn't keep up with Shi Luo's hand speed. After a few minutes, he was scolded and trash-talked blind. Once Shi Luo insulted him enough, he picked up his mouse and continued the game. For low-level games like these, it didn't matter if they were missing a teammate. Shi Luo and the two other team members quickly and accurately destroyed the enemy's resurrection stone and a big win popped up on screen. In the chat interface, the other two teammates thanked Shi Luo, and Shi Luo did not reply. When he was about to withdraw, the fierce thief strong who had been idling for nearly 20 minutes, mystifyingly sent out a sour statement, "So what if you won? It's just because your opponents were also SHT. They better not team me up with this kind of medic anymore. Fierce thief strong, if you can't play a medic then study more. Watch how pro players operate, like Whisper. Fierce thief strong, look at how other medics play. You can only help one teammate. Stop making me laugh. Fierce thief strong, good thing Whisper is going to return to China. When the time comes, you can watch his live broadcasts. Hee, I hope I never see you again." This fierce thief strong quit the game after finding a venue for his sour graping. The other two teammates immediately comforted each other and ignored him. Shi Luo looked at the chat record and was shocked. A few minutes later, Shi Luo cancelled his next match, got up and went downstairs. In the lounge on the first floor, team manager Zhao Feng was looking at WeChat. When he saw Shi Luo coming, he sighed. "I've been getting all these complaints. Did you just trash talk a random player? I told you, you can spray as much as you want when you play in private. But if it's a live broadcast then bear with it as much as you can. When you do it this publicly, when people ask me, what can I say? I can't cover it for you even if I want to, you." Zhao Feng was looking at WeChat as he babbled. When he finally looked up and saw Shi Luo, he was startled. "What's wrong with you? What's with that look? I didn't say anything about you." Shi Luo's looked gloomy. Without saying a word, he turned around to head back upstairs. Halfway there, he turned and went back. Manager stared at Shi Luo in shock. "What the hell are you doing?" Shi Luo stood still and asked coldly, "Yu Sui is coming back to China?" Zhao Feng was unable to utter a word. Zhao Feng nodded cautiously. "Yes, he may even possibly be back already." Shi Luo's lips moved without a sound, and it took a while to slowly say, "No one told me. Who would dare to tell you? Everyone knows you too." Sigh, "I was going to tell you. It's just that we've been busy lately and the transfer period's coming up soon. There's so many things I haven't gotten round to yet." The more he spoke the more he seemed inadequate. He smiled apologetically and said, "For your sake, we didn't consider signing him." That's all there was to it. Several of his other teammates came into the lounge. His teammates felt that there was something off and they were baffled as they looked at Zhao Feng and Shi Luo. Shi Luo also realized his loss of composure. After a moment, his lips remained flat as he said, "It's nothing. So he's back. I just wanted to ask." He headed back upstairs to continue his live broadcast. It was as if nothing happened just now. In the lounge on the first floor, Shi Luo's teammates were quite puzzled. Bewildered, they asked, "What happened? Who's back?" Feng pursed his lips. Whisper, "Yu Sui. He came back from the European League." The medic on the team was startled. Whisper. Feng shot him a look, telling the medic not to be so loud. The medic hastily covered his mouth, and then whispered, "Whisper is back in our region? Which team is he going to?" FCK, this year's transfer period is really going to be earth-shattering. Feng shook his head, no one knows yet where he's going. The youngest in the team, their sniper, entered the pro scene late and so he wasn't familiar with the situation. He said, Yu Shen, the former No. 1 medic in the domestic league, currently the European region's No. 1 medic, 3 consecutive world championships. Who doesn't know of him? So? What's wrong with him coming back? What does it have to do with Shij? Feng sighed. It has a lot to do with Shi Luo. 2 years ago, Yu Sui was still the strongest player in our region, and Shi Luo was just an unknown ordinary high school student. Shi Luo originally didn't want to join this industry. It was Yu Sui who personally signed him into his own club, promising a lifetime contract. Afterwards, he personally packed up Shi Luo and sold his contract to another club for a high price. Chapter 2. The teammates looked at each other in blank dismay. Feng shifted in his seat to a more comfortable position, and slowly said, "I'm going to tell you about this now so that you'll understand the situation. You've got to know things clearly so you won't say anything to set him off." Before starting his pro career, Shi Luo had been doing well in school, exceptionally well. Shi Luo didn't want to go down this path so he would occasionally do some live broadcasts. Of course, his family didn't agree with him. Shi Luo hasn't contacted his family up till now. No one knows if it's because of this that he's had a falling out with his family. No one dares to ask. His live broadcasts were quite popular at the time. It ranked high on the Chinese servers. He was soon discovered by several clubs. Shi Luo was still playing a medic at that time. There's always a shortage of good medics. There had been a lot of clubs who contacted him and he refused everyone, including me. At the time, what he told me was that he didn't want to play professionally. But then for some unknown reason, he joined Whisper's team. Because of this, he offended several clubs. He'd said that we were wasting our time and that he'd never ever play professionally only to go to Whisper, huh? You all know what happened after that. Not long after that, who knows what got into Whisper, he rebelled against the domestic league, took his team and left. It made him infamous. Manager Feng glanced upstairs and pursed his lips. We shouldn't be talking about this so listen up. Feng loosened his grip. At that time, the European region was forming their Galactico team. They were missing a first-class medic and Whisper suddenly decided to go to the European region to develop. Those he could take with him, he took with him. Those he couldn't, he sold their contracts for a high price and that was how Shi Luo was sold to the innocent team. The people in the room were rendered speechless. After a long while, a team member whispered. Shi Luo was used purely as a money-making tool. One person asked bewilderedly, at that time, Yu Sui's team was already the strongest in the country. He'd even won the world championship. So, why? Who knows? Everyone has their own aspirations. The contract fees over there are indeed higher, and their business operations are also very well developed. Feng continued slowly, because those top-level players left 2 years ago, our region suffered a lot. We missed the World Championship for 2 consecutive years. Whisper, though, had done well for himself. He became the runner-up in the World Championships during his first year in Germany. The next year the Galactico team finally clicked, and they won the World Championship. He is indeed amazing. He can find glory anywhere. The team's sniper curled his lips in contempt. He ran off to play for an enemy region. What's so glorious about that? Hey, don't be so narrow-minded. As clubs, we're in competing regional divisions. We're not enemy countries. These matters are of little interest, but Feng made some allowances, be that as it may, everyone still wants for these types of players to stay within our region. Look, how many fans does Whisper have right now? This is maybe just the 10 or 20% that remained. Back then, when he suddenly moved to another division, he truly made a lot of fans angry. For every 1,000 that wanted him dead, 10,000 would curse him. Seeing how he still has this many diehard fans, you could tell just how good he was then. A member of the team glanced upwards and whispered, if he weren't amazing, he wouldn't have been able to get Shi Luo to reject so many of the clubs for him. Hey, isn't it that Shi Luo offended a lot of clubs? Then how did Shi Luo end up on another team? You can still sign people who've offended you, ba. Feng couldn't help laughing. When faced with profits, who would care about something like this? Back then, he was a medic known as Little Whisper. When they heard Whisper was selling his contract, there wasn't anyone who wasn't interested. Captain Gugan of the Innocent team has always been good friends with Whisper, and Whisper sold Shi Luo to the Innocent team. The other striker in their team muttered, Shi Luo must hate Whisper. Probably. But who knows? Nothing good was being said about Whisper back then, but Shi Luo never said anything about him. No one could say anything about Whisper in front of him. Any mention of Whisper would get him angry. The manager shrugged. Then Shi Luo changed his job to a striker. Innocent was very good about it. He wanted to change so they'll let him. He wasn't forced to play a specific job. But Innocent had been lacking medics and they had no shortage of strikers. Innocent also didn't want to waste his time making him watch the dispenser, so they decided to sell his contract to me. Feng smiled shrewdly, of course, I got the better end of that bargain. Who could have thought that Shi Luo's development as a striker would totally go against the natural order? In less than half a year, he had reached the top of the domestic servers and became our team's chief striker. If Whisper had known, he would have regretted selling him for only 3 million yuan. Everyone laughed, and one of their teammates sighed. No wonder Shij had such a big reaction. I only heard that Shij had spent several months with Whisper's team, but I didn't expect so many things to have happened. Feng followed with a sigh, what I know is also limited. But it was really chaotic 2 years ago. Our league has had a lot of trouble in recent years because of the capital shocks. The enmity between these players now probably arose then. After listening for a long while, the medic on the team probed out, Manager, now that Whisper's back, won't he come to our team? Feng looked pensive, and patted the medic's shoulder with a hearty smile, what are you afraid of? It's almost impossible. Look at your Shij, do you think he'd ever get along with Whisper? Everyone laughed and talked about other gossip. On the second floor, Shi Luo sat back down on his seat and he clicked the continue button on the game client and waited for his next match. The live broadcast was still open, and the barrage was still in a heated discussion. He's back. He's back. It can't be that he only just found out Whisper's coming back, right? Did he leave just now because of this? There's so many people in his team, and so many people in the league. Did no one tell him? Probably no one dared to tell him. Which team will Whisper go to? Can't he come to Ayak? Impossible. If he did, come the next day, they'll be carrying a corpse out of Ayak headquarters. Shi Luo and Yu Sui, one of them would definitely be dead. Ha 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 ha, come to Ayak. That'll be fun to watch. What do you want Whisper to do in Ayak? Can the new fan just shut up? I'm not in the mood to bring up the past, okay? So don't provoke people. Just asking, but are there any CP fans here? Just now this knife stabbed into me. I'm losing blood, I need my sisters to quickly pull it out and comfort me. Tat. The barrage just turned strange. Just what's going on? That's unexpected. He was only away for 5 minutes. And now, he's able to play like usual. My son is all grown up. I'm so proud. Looks like he's not completely unaffected. I think I heard the sound of a lighter. I'm calling it. Evil smoking cause he's off camera. Shi Luo didn't say anything and he entered the match. He took a deep drag of the cigarette and then snuffed it out against the ashtray. He then continued to level up his side account. When playing at this level, Luo Shi didn't need to think. He could rely on muscle memory to get him points. He played 5 games in a row and won 5 games in a row. In each game, he was the MVP. Shi Luo's mom fans were endlessly gratified. The little whelp has matured and he was now a steady and stable player. Although he'll still engage in a bit of spraying, he was no longer so easily affected. Take a look at this calm and light attitude, look at this unfazed manner, look at his steady playing. Naturally, there was no shortage of black fans in the chat room of popular players such as Shi Luo. There were always repeaters in the barrage, going on and on about how Shi Luo only knew how to abuse players in low-level matches like these. The haters would often send it out on the chat, and when Shi Luo was waiting in the queue, he looked at the barrage interface and happened to see one. You only ever use your side accounts when you do live broadcasts. Guess you only want to show off on low-level matches. If you've got what it takes, then use your main account. Shi Luo was immune to this low-level insult. He glanced at it and continued to wait in the queue. Unfortunately, the system automatically cancelled the queue when the queue timed out. Shi Luo simply logged out of his side account, and logged onto the main account on the domestic server provided by the league to every pro player. Naturally, there was a cheer in the live room. His main account had already reached the top of the national rankings, so of course, the queue was slower. Shi Luo clicked on the ready button. He leaned against the back of his gaming chair, a cigarette between his lips, waiting patiently to enter the game. While waiting, Shi Luo looked at his in-game character, and became a little lost in thought. Luo Shi was indeed affected by the news of Yu Sui's return to China. This wasn't anything to be embarrassed about. There's no point in denying it. After 2 years, his former captain, his former model for his in-game job, his once ultimate goal as a professional, and the person he once hated the most has returned to the local scene. Wasn't it normal for his mood to be a bit volatile? Shi Luo had long expected Yu Sui to return to China, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. Shi Luo was very clear on the number of years on Yu Sui's contract. If he remembered correctly, there should still be 3 months remaining in Yu Sui's German contract. Shi Luo gently tapped on the keyboard and said silently in his heart, 3 months in advance. But it also made sense. Since Yu Sui was back, he was definitely going to continue to play. The new season begins in 2 months. Yu Sui needed to sign with a new team before the start of the new season. Afterwards, he'll use around a month to get used to playing with his teammates and adapt to the domestic league's rhythm. That way he'll greet the new season in perfect shape. He had arranged everything very thoroughly. The live broadcast was still on, so it wasn't convenient to use the computer. Shi Luo picked up his phone and entered a few keywords to search for related information. The news of Yu Sui's return to China came out 3 days ago in the hottest esports forum in China. The news spread so extensively. The matter everyone was still arguing about was Yu Sui's rebellion against the domestic region. However, right now, there was a shortage of medics in the domestic league, so they were still happy to see him return. Other than that, there was little concrete news. Over and over again, it was said that Whisper has reportedly left the European region and will return to register in the domestic region. When will he return? Which team will he join afterwards? There was no useful news. Shi Luo set his mobile phone aside, and countless team names appeared in his head. Except for Team Saint, which utilized medics as its core, any number of teams were possible. Including the team he plays for, Yaoi. What Zhao Feng said was nice to hear. For his sake, they wouldn't sign Yu Sui. When Shi Luo heard this, he wanted to laugh. Either for the club's overall business value, or for the team's performance, or just for the buzz it would generate, as long as it could bring realizable benefits to Yaoi, Yao Feng and the other senior executives wouldn't take into account what he felt about the matter. For these purely commercial clubs, he was nothing more than a player that could bring in relatively more money. Shi Luo had already seen through these trivial matters 2 years ago. Now, these embarrassing and beautiful words were just truly laughable. Yu Sui, this money tree, has now returned. Yao Feng must have contacted him, and now it was simply a matter of whether he could get him to join or not. If he really were to join, then. Shi Luo's lips moved, he unconsciously looked at the computer screen. The match hasn't started yet. Shi Luo glanced down at the barrage. The barrage was discussing which team Whisper would join, and the analysis was surprisingly logical. Let's leave the bottom teams out of the discussion. They wouldn't be able to afford it. We could also take out Saint. That team lacks medics the least, or it could be said that they're not lacking in first-rate medics. Ayak could also be excluded, right? Although Ayak's medic is pretty average, if Whisper goes to Ayak, then this year's transfer period won't just be the earth-shattering, it will be apocalyptic. Yeah, let's leave it. If Yu Sui goes to Ayak, I'm worried that Shi Luo will sneak into Yu Sui's dorm room and kill him in the middle of the night. Innocent might be possible. Yu Sui has a good relationship with her captain. I just don't know if Innocent is willing to spend that much money. When we take everything into account, the Bison team is the most likely. The club owner is very rich and can afford Yu Sui no problem. Though it's kind of a shame to have Yu Sui match up with those strikers on the Bison team. Ha 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 ha. In any case, the Bison team's owner is filthy rich. He could just buy Shi Luo too. Yeah, ha 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 ha. He could buy them both, and as long as they can keep from killing each other, next year's World Championship will be in the bag. Although I want to have Shi Luo transfer to Bison, can't you stop always pulling Shi Luo and Whisper together? I'm sick of people trying to make this into a thing. Please don't add fuel to this. The fans would go crazy if these two went to the same team. Shi Luo stared blankly at the barrage, and calculated the possibility that he and Yu Sui would be on the same team next season as the fans thought. Yu Sui comes to Ayak. Or maybe he and Yu Sui would both be bought by Bison. Then the probability is. Before Shi Luo could come up with a formula, he finally entered the game. Those at the top tier would always run into people they know. The other striker on Shi Luo's team was Innocent's team captain, Gu Gan. Shi Luo spent a short 2 months at Innocent. During that time, Gu Gan had taken good care of him. Unfortunately, Innocent was teaming with strikers, and the team couldn't take on any more. After Shi Luo changed to a striker and could no longer stay at Innocent, it had been Gu Gan who contacted his current club to give Shi Luo a more suitable transfer contract. Because of the care he'd given him at that time, Shi Luo has always respected Gu Gan. When Shi Luo entered the map and saw Gu Gan's ID, he immediately greeted him. Ayak evil, Captain Gu. Maybe Gu Gan didn't notice, but he never gave a reply back. Shi Luo didn't mind, and he made a mark on the map and started to probe his way forward. The team chat unexpectedly gave a notification beep. Shi Luo inclined his head and took a look. Innocent Gu, Yu Sui is returning to our region, did you know? Shi Luo looked at the screen and typed after a while, I just found out. Shi Luo glanced at the barrage, and was just about to type a reminder to Gu Gan that he was doing a live broadcast, when the notification for team chat beeped again. Innocent Gu, he came to my team. Innocent, the team which lacked strikers the least. Shi Luo stared silently at Gu Gan's message for a long time. Thinking of the fans' clear and careful analysis on the barrage just now, Shi Luo suddenly couldn't help laughing. Then he couldn't stop himself from having a laughing fit as he held the keyboard. Yu Sui was going to Innocent. There was now no possibility of them being on the same team. The fans can now rest assured. Chapter 3. Gu Gan was still sending messages non-stop. Innocent Gu, he will be at the warm-up match with your team next Monday. It hasn't been decided whether he'll go up or not. Innocent Gu, when the time comes, When you see him, don't make trouble. Innocent-gu, you're not a kid anymore. Innocent-gu, I shouldn't need to say this, but I was worried that you'd suddenly find out during the match and it might affect your game. Innocent-gu, although winning or losing the match won't affect the team's points for the season, I didn't want to have an unfair advantage. You should mentally prepare yourself in advance. Shi Luo had laughed enough and stared at the screen in a trance. He had no idea if at this moment, at Innocent's base, Yu Sui was standing next to Gu Gen's computer, watching as Gu Gen asked him to take some precautionary measures. Shi Luo rubbed the back of his neck and typed a question in response. What's there to prepare for? Innocent-gu, Ayakival, am I going to trade blows with him at the stadium? Ayakival, don't they say let bygones be bygones? I've forgotten all about those things. Ayakival, by the way, just a friendly reminder, Captain Gu. Looks like you've just set off an issue. I'm doing a live broadcast. Innocent-gu, you. Shi Luo typed with a smile. Captain Gu was too fast. I couldn't stop you. After knowing that Shi Luo was doing a live broadcast, Gu Gen didn't say anything more. Shi Luo also didn't speak anymore. The two silently pushed against the opposing side. After the game, without even a greeting, they exited the map one after the other. Naturally, at this moment, none of the esports forums were very calm. Gu Gen had let out such big news that the forums exploded immediately. There are too many points for the players to discuss. There were those hopefuls who were already dreaming about Innocent winning the World Championships next season. There were those who were regretting that Innocent still lacked a great sniper. There were also those who wanted to watch the excitement and felt sorry that Yu Sui couldn't be on the same team as Shi Luo. And there were still those who couldn't set aside their hate and were still scolding Yu Sui for abandoning the domestic league before and thought that he was unworthy of returning. Reasonable discussions and personal attacks were flying all around. Then, there were the countless haters with private agendas taking the opportunity to create rumors. The forum administrators temporarily blocked posts until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, when the immortals could no longer stay awake and things gradually calmed down. They've made enough noise and issued enough criticism that the rest calmed down and suddenly realized a problem. Today was Saturday. Saturday. In other words, after another day it would be Monday. Every year, there was a 3-month rest period after the end of the Fog World Championship matches until the start of the new season. During these 3 months, teams would officially or secretly reorganize. The professional league team that failed to secure their spot the previous year will go to play the qualifying matches. Newly transferred team members and coaches would familiarize themselves with their new team and teammates. During these messy 3 months, in order to keep the viewers' attention and interest, the league inserted a 1-month-long period of preseason matches, which Gu Gen referred to as a warm-up match. The winning or losing of the preseason match doesn't affect the team's points. These were purely for the sake of profit and to remain relevant to their viewers. It was also to allow the newly transferred players to train and prepare for next season. The preseason matches were simple round-robin, best-of-1 matches. One game would decide victory or defeat. Except for the 2 teams that were related last season, the 10 teams that were still in the league would participate, playing against each team in turn. And to kick off the preseason matches next Monday, there will be a matchup between Evil's Ayak team and Gu Gen's Innocent team. Ayak vs Innocent, it was a game that was already quite hot, and now because of Yu Sui's arrival, the interest in this topic quickly soared. In less than 2 days, fans of the 2 teams and Yu Sui's local fans increased the ticket price of this warm-up match by more than 10 times. On the day of the match, the fans surrounded the outside the stadium until not even a single drop of water could pass through. Shi Luo and Yu Sui's fans had a little bit of contention, and their banners showing their support were all bigger than the next. Inside the Ayak team's nanny car, the team manager, Feng, looked out through the window of the co-pilot seat and clicked his tongue. Scary. Shi Luo, your normally soft and gentle sister fans are uncharacteristically fierce today. Looks like they came with swords drawn and bows bent. Shi Luo said nothing. He leaned against the back of his seat with his eyes closed, and headphones over his ears, blowing his chewing gum. Zhao Feng looked back at Shi Luo and said, wearing headphones again. Did you hear me? Sigh. To tell you the truth, the boss will be watching the live broadcast of today's match. He's paying very close attention. He even sent me a message on WeChat. Give it to me straight, what do you think about our chances of winning today? Shi Luo chewed his gum, took off one of his earphones, and after a pause, said, 20%. Zhao Feng's expression turned bitter when he heard these words. The other players in the car, though, suddenly relaxed. Shi Luo said that there was little hope of winning, which meant that it was totally normal to lose. They didn't have to take the blame or receive a scolding. The other three teammates looked much more relaxed and started joking and bantering. Zhao Feng, though, wasn't reconciled to losing. Don't say that. Can't you raise the team's morale a little? Innocent's sniper is pretty average, and their team hasn't gotten used to each other yet. I think we've got a pretty good chance of winning. And as I've told you, the boss is watching. If the boss is watching, it's 20%, and when he isn't watching, it's still 20%. Shi Luo wasn't about to make a military pledge in order to make the club owner happy. Before, our probability of winning against Innocent was at 50%, that's all. Now. After a short pause, Shi Luo continued, now they've changed their medic and patched up the team's shortcomings. Our possibility of winning will inevitably shrink, isn't this true? Zhao Feng naturally understood that and he laughed. Don't they say that you're supposed to outperform yourself on the field? Well, it's fine. I wouldn't want to put more pressure on you, just do your best out there, alright? The fans' cheers receded in the background as the nanny car went into the underground garage. Shi Luo put on his team uniform and prepared to get off. Of course, we will. The IAC team members and their entourage proceeded to their own lounge under the guidance of the stadium staff. They walked through a long corridor and passed by the lounge with the Innocent team logo pasted on the door. Shi Luo paused in his steps and shot a glance at the tightly closed door. Manager Zhao Feng's heart instantly jumped to his throat. Although everything had been normal with Shi Luo during the past 2 days, Zhao Feng has worked with him for 2 years and could clearly feel that the young master had been suppressing his anger in his heart since he learned of Yu Sui's return to China, and that anger was definitely not small. He was very worried now that a single inappropriate remark might set off Shi Luo and he would suddenly kick open the door to the Innocent lounge and do something that would land him on the front page of the newspapers. Everything's still fine. Shi Luo's just taking a look. Shi Luo wore his headphones and blew a big chewing gum bubble, with nary an expression on his face. With his peripherals bag in tow, he entered the IAC team's lounge. The IAC team's coach hurriedly emphasized the key points for each team member and adjusted everyone's mood before the match. Since there was never anything to tell Shi Luo, the coach generally didn't waste time talking to him. Today, contrary to his usual practice, he asked Shi Luo, Evil, do you have any ideas? Shi Luo had been looking down at his phone this whole time. When he heard these words, he looked up, what ideas? Coach wasn't as cautious and meticulous as Zhao Feng, and he straightforwardly said, our team are all newcomers. Only you are familiar with Whisper. Do you have any points to mention? Things we need to pay attention to. Coach said, you should know best how Whisper operates, right? Shi Luo put away his phone. No one could possibly be more familiar than him. Back then, Yu Sui had been the one to teach Shi Luo how to play a medic, little by little, detail by detail, he had shaped him. Shi Luo was called Little Whisper at that time, not only because he played a medic very well, but even more because his gameplay was almost a complete copy of Yu Sui's. No one understood Yu Sui's customary gameplay more than Shi Luo did. Shi Luo nodded. Naturally. The coach was reassured. This is a big advantage for us. In a moment, You should listen to Shi Luo's commands in the early stage. We must pay close attention to Whisper. Don't treat him as just a medic. He can kill people. You must never ever let him take your head. It would be best not to let him get even the auxiliary points in the early stages. This person will be terrible once he can use the public economy. If he manages to buy the three-faced Photon shield in the later stage, he'll be even more difficult to play against. Be careful, Shi Luo. Shi Luo looked up, and the coach emphasized, for today's match against NSN, don't focus on Gu Gan. Look at their medic and target Whisper. Got it? Zhao Feng stared at the coach all jittery. His entire face spelled out, Whisper, 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 all the time. Aren't you afraid of death? Contrary to what Zhao Feng expected, Shi Luo acted like normal. Target Whisper, no problem. The coach then emphasized a few more points to note. When it was 10 minutes before the match, the stadium staff came to verify the information of the players for the last time, and then informed them, your opponents, the innocent team's starting lineup will be Rod as sniper, Gu Gan as striker, Sinren as striker and Wewe as medic. Shi Luo turned to look. What? The entire IAC was dumbfounded. Zhao Feng confirmed, the opponent's medic is Wewe. Whisper won't be getting on stage? The staff nodded. Yes. Zhao Feng didn't quite understand, and asked again, is Whisper here? The staff member replied, he's here. I just saw him. Oh. Zhao Feng smiled, strange, innocent spent who knows how much to buy Yu Sui and they're not going to let him play? Could it be that they didn't want to expose too much of their tactics in the preseason? Not likely. Maybe Yu Sui hasn't gotten used to playing with his teammates yet? The staff smiled and said nothing. He left after confirming their information. Zhao Feng happily said to everyone, do your best. Break a leg. If Whisper isn't going on stage, that's all the better for us, Shi Luo. Zhao Feng asked. What's our chance of winning now? When Shi Luo frowned slightly, he didn't know what medicine Innocent was selling in their gourd, and he answered, 40%. Zhao Feng was dissatisfied. In the car, you said that we had a 50% win rate against an Innocent without Yu Sui. How can it become 40% after just a short while? Shi Luo opened his peripheral bag to get his own keyboard and mouse, and said, they've got a momentum bonus. There was no need to mention who this momentum referred to. After pondering for a bit, Zhao Feng had to agree. With Whisper as their trump card, regardless of whether the ace of the entire team was not playing or not, the confidence and vigor he gave to the whole team was enough. Zhao Feng smiled indifferently. Let it be, then. Everyone should just do their best. This is already good news. This is the preseason's inaugural match. Everyone, good luck out there. Everyone nodded. Zhao Feng glanced at Shi Luo, confirming that his mood was stable, before he could rest at ease. Zhao Feng self-mockingly smiled. Maybe he was just overthinking it. Looking at Shi Luo, he obviously couldn't look more normal. A few minutes later, after the staff came once again to inform the team, everyone stood up and followed the staff to the stage. Shi Luo walked at the very front. He walked to the stage as usual while discussing a few things with the other striker on the team. They hadn't reached halfway through the long corridor, when Shi Luo's footsteps paused and he stood rooted on the spot. Less than 5 meters away from them, the Innocent lounge door opened. Innocent's coach and team members came out in order. Innocent's coach walked out in front, followed by Gu Gan. Behind him were Rod and Sinren, who had their arms around each other's shoulders. The two were followed by Wewe, and then at the very back, patting Wewe's shoulder, was a person in civilian clothing. Maybe it was because he had joined the team in a rush and the uniform with his ID on it hadn't made it in time. Evidently, this man hadn't cut his hair in 2 years. His brown hair now went past his shoulder. German food probably didn't agree with him, because now he also looked a lot thinner. There are so many changes, so much so that the other people from IAC asks with a puzzled expression, who's the tall handsome guy behind Wewe? Only Shi Luo could see through his totally altered back profile with a single glance and recognize his former captain. Shi Luo looked at Yu Sui's back and it was like he was nailed to where he stood. Since knowing the news of Yu Sui's return, Shi Luo believed himself to be calm. He never forgot himself, he hasn't made any fuss, hasn't caused any trouble for the team, and hasn't given any of the haters anything to joke about. He wasn't agitated, he wasn't irritable. Totally unlike 2 years ago when he'd so desperately made a scene and kicked up a fuss. Shi Luo originally thought that this was because he had grown up, matured. He was now able to calmly face the past and calmly face this person. What a pity, this was just what Shi Luo thinks. Suddenly, the ups and downs of Shi Luo's chest grew faster. The mouse in his right hand gave a clack, clack as he began to fidget. Shi Luo? Shi Luo? Zhao Feng frowned, and gently patted Shi Luo. What's wrong? When Shi Luo took a deep breath, he accidentally choked. Zhao Feng was confused, and he glanced forward. Who is that? Shi Luo's expression gradually recovered. He said, whisper. FCK. Everyone in Ayak was startled. Zhao Feng was too surprised to say anything. This. Everyone had made a lot of noise, and the innocent players who were walking ahead, all turned back, including Yu Sui. Yu Sui was stunned when he caught sight of Shi Luo. Suddenly, the rise and fall of Shi Luo's chest intensified. He turned his eyes away from Yu Sui's. It was more than he could bear. He stared fixedly ahead and with peripherals in hand, he walked past the entire innocent team. Luoshi walked all the way forward, ignoring the staff who was signaling for him and his team to wait. He walked through the waiting area, directly into the dazzling stage bathed in lights. A tsunami of cheers burst from the spectator stands. Chapter 4. Evil. Upon entering the soundproof glass room, the 4 Ayak players took their seats. While testing out his microphone, the sniper of the team asked, somewhat ill at ease, "Are you alright?" Within the team's voice chat, Shi Luo said dispiritedly, "I'm fine." The 3 teammates all turned to look at Shi Luo. He didn't look the least bit fine. Shi Luo seemed like a completely different man since he saw Yu Sui in the corridor. His complexion was ashen and his expression had completely changed. If you pay close attention, you'll notice the slight tremble of his hands. Just now, his teammates noticed that it took Shi Luo a few tries before he was able to install his keyboard because his hands had been shaking. He had jammed it in so forcefully that the medic seated beside him was afraid he'd wrecked the USB interface. The difference between the Shi Luo now and how he usually is was too big. The sniper tried to ease the tension before the match. Unfortunately, this person wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed and he brought up the pot that didn't boil. Just now, that was really whisper. Wow, he's changed a lot. I'm half a fan of his but I didn't recognize him at all. Sheej has really good eyes. The medic stared at the sniper with a terrified look and tried to salvage the situation. Of course, Shi Luo had been teammates with Whisper in the past. He'd definitely be more familiar with him than others. The sniper nodded, yes, after all, it's team camaraderie. Originally, Shi Luo had on a tense expression. But hearing his teammates trying to sound him out inconspicuously only to make it worse, Shi Luo couldn't help but give a self-deprecating laugh. Seeing him now, the others must think that he'd gone mad. They had just been teammates, they just hadn't seen each other for 2 years and it was just a reunion. That's all. Professional players transferred clubs, divisions and regions all the time. Separating, reuniting, these were routine occurrences. Even today's opponent, Innocent was Shi Luo's old team. Seeing former teammates on the field was nothing out of the ordinary. So what was he losing his cool for? Shi Luo finally managed to adjust his peripherals. He opened the gaming client and opened his account. After logging onto the competition server, there was still about 10 minutes before the official match. The players were all warming up and Shi Luo also shot a full cartridge of bullets. His play was complete garbage, an absolute eyesore. When there was a lot of fluctuations in one's mood, the hands might become cold and stiff from insufficient blood supply. It was a psychological problem, there was nothing that could be done. Shi Luo was already trying to control himself. Shi Luo let go of the keyboard and he gently rubbed his stiff hands. He took a deep breath and exhaled. This won't do. Shi Luo looked at the screen. It had been quiet for a while. He whispered into the mic, we weren't just teammates. His teammates were shocked when they heard Shi Luo's voice from their headphones. They didn't know where Shi Luo was going with this. The medic replied dully, Manager told us before that Whisper was the one who took you to play pro. Shi Luo said, not just that. His teammates looked at each other in dismay. The referee monitoring the Ayaki voice chat also tilted his head and glanced at Shi Luo. No one understood what was happening with Shi Luo. Shi Luo had always talked very little, and he was always tight-lipped about Whisper. What has gotten into him today? My relationship with Whisper. Shi Luo tried to keep his voice mild. Let's just say that, back then, it was almost like I had given him my life. The medic froze and he looked around uneasily. He covered his mic, lowered his voice and reminded him, Shij, you should remember that there's an archive of the game's voice chats. You should and #K2026 think about what you should and shouldn't say. Shi Luo alternately massaged his arms. He simply said, of course, I know that. I first knew about this when Whisper told me during my first professional match. Shi Luo slowly said as he rubbed his gradually warming hands, at that time, it wasn't long after I joined the team. There was only one more match left in the regular season. If I wanted to follow the team to play in the playoffs, I needed to play in the match. The Fog League Tournament Association expressly stipulated that professional players must play at least one best-of-3 match for their team during the regular season in order to appear in the playoffs as a starter or substitute. At that time, our team was first in overall points for the regular season, and we were a shoo-in for the playoffs. So, it didn't matter if I played in the match. It was just to give me a place in the playoffs. Shi Luo moved his fingers, practicing his joints. The team wasn't under any pressure. But for me it was like I was a duck driven onto a perch. I wasn't ready but I was inexplicably pushed on stage. I haven't even watched a match and I was going as part of the starting lineup. I was completely ignorant. Whatever Whisper said, I did. Shi Luo placed his hands on the keyboard and mouse once again. He told me to test the mic before the match, so I tested the mic. He told me the best way to test the mic was to sing, so I sang. Although I thought it was quite stupid, I thought what the captain says must be right, so I followed him. I really sang a couple of lines. The next day, my song was featured in the game as part of the live chat Best of the Best collection. The 3 members gasped in surprise. They looked at Shi Luo pitifully, unable to imagine what a terrible scene that was. I was very young then, 1 year younger than Wewa, just 17. I didn't understand anything. Shi Luo sneered, I was a stupid little SHT. The medic reluctantly said, no, you weren't stupid. You were a newcomer. Whisper shouldn't have bullied you. Bullied? Shi Luo reloaded the gun and said, neither too tense nor too slow, it was a regular season game that had no effect on the rankings. They could have made a dog play that match. No one paid any attention to me or to that game. He was a medic and I was also a medic. In fact, I could just gone up there, taken his position and played any which way but. Shi Luo took aim and continued, but he was uneasy, afraid that I had no experience. Afraid that I would get stage fright, afraid that no one would take care of me, and afraid that the strikers on the team would look at me as just some newcomer and not cooperate well with me. He was a medic, and for that match, he played as a striker for the first time. His teammates looked at Shi Luo in shock. Whisper played as a striker? The other striker in the team asked weakly. I seem to recall that Whisper made it clear in an interview that he didn't like playing the other jobs. Since his debut, Yu Sui has only ever played as a medic. Even in normal broadcasts done just for amusement, he still wouldn't play any other occupation. Before, when he had participated in an event, the organizers had personally asked him to show them how he played the other occupations, but he tactfully declined. He himself has also said in numerous interviews that he didn't like playing the other jobs. Shi Luo nodded. He didn't like it, but if he didn't play as a striker, how could he go on stage with me as a teammate? The expression in their medic's eyes turned complicated. So, Whisper used to treat you very well. He accompanied me during my debut match. What I couldn't do, he taught me how to. He dealt with any matter, regardless of importance. Shi Luo's face returned to normal, and his voice was finally as steady as usual. Just like now, when I'm feeling extremely uncertain, I shouldn't avoid the problem and I should voice out painful matters. By chatting, I can vent and speedily return to a steady state. He's the one who taught me that. The medic couldn't help but continue to ask, if he treated you so well before then, how did matters between you two get like this? That's just the problem. Because he was so good to me before, Shi Luo held the mouse and said faintly, so later, when he so easily pushed me away, it only to made me brood on it even until now. Shi Luo laughed and murmured, if I had never seen light. Shi Luo didn't say anything else. He held his breath for a couple of seconds, and along with a burst of gunfire, Shi Luo steadily shot a cartridge of bullet through the same bullet hole. His teammates were shocked almost to the point of having their mouths agape. He had been such a good senior to me and I had just met him once again. Unfortunately, the way he sent off Yaoi to play reminded me of when he sent me off to play for the first time. I couldn't control my emotions and I made myself a laughingstock for everyone. Shi Luo let go of his mouse and rubbed his shoulders. His expression has returned to normal. Okay, I'm fine now. His teammates marveled at Shi Luo's natural and spontaneous way of operating his character inside. This way of readjusting your mood is amazing. The match was about to start. The sniper asked, their lineup hasn't changed. Should we still use our usual style of play against NSN? Let's target their strikers? Shi Luo said, no, we'll target the medic today. The sniper was surprised. We're targeting Yaoi? Aren't you guys on good terms? We have a good relationship and I often look after him. Shi Luo adjusted his microphone. We'll focus on their medic. It's best that we kill him as soon as he shows up. Let's not leave him any room to do anything. The striker smiled, so this is how you want to play this? But Yaoi usually doesn't show up during the early stages, right? Can we still target him? Shi Luo stared at the screen. I have a feeling he will this time. The striker raised an eyebrow. Alright then. I like this brainless kind of playing too. The team's medic shivered. You guys are terrible. The game began. Sure enough, just as Shi Luo expected, at the beginning of the match, Yaoi followed the striker to feel his way around. Shi Luo couldn't be more familiar with the route he was taking. Shi Luo didn't even have the sniper open the scope for confirmation. He directly opened fire and got his first kill off Yaoi. After receiving first blood, Shi Luo could already upgrade. The IAC medic was too surprised to utter a word. The poisonous mist hasn't even been cleared yet. How did you find him there? I didn't see him. I heard him. Shi Luo held his breath. Next, after returning, he'll go around to the west and replace the striker's photon shield. Pay attention to your positions. It was like Yaoi had listed to Shi Luo's commands. 2 minutes later, IAC's sniper got the kill on the west side of the map. The sniper laughed and spied himself. Did you also hear that he was heading west? I didn't hear it. I guessed. Now that he's lost his head twice, he wouldn't dare go by himself to clear the fog. He'll follow after the striker to gain some auxiliary points. Shi Luo quickly said, Medic, you're with me. They're going to go for a frontal assault. Their team's medic heard him and first gave their sniper a photon shield before following after Shi Luo. Sure enough, 3 seconds later, Innocent, who'd already lost 2 heads, were unable to hold back and rushed at Shi Luo. Shi Luo had anticipated that. Moreover, his accessories were better than Gu Gan's. He wasn't afraid of meeting them head-on. Shi Luo immediately opened fire and ordered the medic to hide behind the bunker. He relied on his offensive position to sweep Gu Gan with 2 rounds of gunfire. Gu Gan didn't stiffen. When he found that Shi Luo had predicted his position, he immediately returned into the cover of the poisonous mist without handing over his head. He also fired at Shi Luo before hiding in the bunker. Unfortunately, the other innocent striker, Zinren, didn't have Gu Gan's level of awareness. He hadn't escaped in time and had his head taken by Shi Luo. Luo wanted to assist Zinren, only to expose his position and have his head taken by Shi Luo's striker teammate. Nice. Within 5 minutes of the opening, Ayak strikers and sniper had gotten enough kills and the medic had also gotten enough auxiliary points to upgrade the whole team's equipment. The team's sniper was incredulous. How on earth did you know what they were doing? Shi Luo opened the upgrade interface to buy bullets. It was nothing. I'm very familiar with this kind of tactic. In the early stages, the medic would be used as the bait to give the strikers and sniper enough room to do their work. During the first 5 minutes, they would be able to take their opponent's heads undisturbed. As long as the medic didn't die, they would be able to gain an early advantage. This was the way Yu Sui plays. Unfortunately, Wawa's skills weren't sufficient enough to support this kind of tactic. At this point, Innocent also realized the same thing. But after all, they were an old established team. Despite their opponents getting an early overwhelming advantage, they didn't fall apart. They immediately adjusted their tactics and changed back to their most familiar aggressive tactic, preventing their opponents from continuing to strengthen their dominance. In the end, that tumble they had in the early stages, allowed Ayak to suppress their play despite their recovery in the middle and late stages. 32 minutes later, Ayak killed all the innocent players, destroyed their resurrection stone, and won the game. When the match summary appeared on screen, Shi Luo took a look. No of deaths, Wawa, 13 times. Their team's medic was putting away his peripherals. He was speechless when he saw the match summary. I feel kind of bad for Wawa. You guys targeted him for the entire match. If I were him, I would have quit early on. Shi Luo collected his peripherals. 13 times. That's all. The corner of the medic's mouth twitched. Shishin, if this were a shonen manga, your character would be a villain. Shi Luo didn't mind in the least. Good. I was never a good person anyway. As per usual, the winning team had to be interviewed after the game. The Ayak team was invited to the stage. Worried that some ambitious reporter would provoke Shi Luo to get a soundbite, Zhao Feng had already found a presenter in advance. Therefore, when the time came for the interview, the presenter steered clear of any sensitive topics. After these very bland questions, the team members bowed and thanked their fans for supporting them in the match. They then turned to head to their lounge backstage. They had just won the game, so his teammates were quite excited. Pushing and shoving good-naturedly as they discussed what they'd eat that night. Shi Luo's footsteps were a bit heavy. When he passed the innocent lounge, Shi Luo turned his head and stared. Shi Luo, Shich? The medic looked suspiciously at Shi Luo. What's the matter? Shi Luo came back to his senses. What? The medic smiled. We're going out to eat crayfish. Are you coming with us? Nah. There's going to be a line if you go now. Shi Luo threw the peripherals bag to the medic. You go ahead, I have something to do. The medic took over Shi Luo's peripherals bag and wondered, the interview's over. What else do you need to do? Shi Luo turned around and before the shocked expressions of his teammates, pushed open the door to the innocent lounge. The lounge door was wide open and the room was empty. There was only one person in the room, a cleaning staff member who turned to Shi Luo with a confused expression. Do you need anything? The innocent team has already left. After much difficulty, Shi Luo managed to take deep and even breaths. He closed his eyes and shook his head. I'm sorry. It's nothing. Chapter 5. In the end, Shi Luo didn't go out to dinner with the team. He went back to the base alone and ordered takeaway. Then after a shower, he went to the training room. Those who'd gone out for dinner hadn't come back yet, and so the training room was empty. Shi Luo sat by himself in front of his computer. Shi Luo usually didn't involve himself with the team's group activities. He had no friends in Ayak. It wasn't the team who was isolating him, but Shi Luo himself who preferred to keep a strictly professional relationship with the team. Compared with the other people in the team, who took pains to socialize, Shi Luo preferred to train by himself. Occasionally, when he felt troubled and wished to talk to others, it wouldn't be with the other members of the team. Like now. Shi Luo sat in front of the computer and opened Wawa's live broadcast. In the live broadcast room, Wawa had his webcam open and he was tearfully complaining about Shi Luo. 13 kills. In the first match of the preseason inaugural game, I was killed 13 times. Do you know what that means? It means I did only one thing throughout the entire game. Just one thing. I ran from the resurrection stone to the front line. And when I reached the front line, evil shot me dead. Then I'd just repeat the entire process all over again. I was like a poorly written training script. I'd revive and hand over my head. Revive, hand over head, revive, hand over head. Really, I have already mentally collapsed. Oh, my stomach hurts. Shi Luo took his mouse and made a few clicks. In the broadcast, Wawa covered his face and cried. When he heard the distinctive notification sound, he looked up and sniffed. Someone gave a reward? Thank you to Papa Shi for the 3 meteor showers. Whoa. 3. Thank you to Papa Shi for the reward. Hey, no. Wawa cried angrily, Shi Luo. Shi Luo laughed. Wawa was fuming and said between gritted teeth, some people already think I took money from your club to throw the match today. And now you're even giving me a reward. Shi Luo smiled. He then rewarded Wawa with 5 more meteor showers worth 3,000 yuan each. Fine, fine. Seriously, stop sending rewards. Just invite me out to eat somewhere good sometime. Wawa was an honest young man. He didn't want Shi Luo to waste any more money on the live broadcast platform's processing fees and had him stop sending rewards. If you don't have anything on right now, should we pair up for a match? I'll hold your thigh and leech off some points. That can be your apology to me. Shi Luo didn't respond, but he gave every single one of his complimentary popularity gifts given by the platform to Wawa. He closed the live platform and opened the game client. Shi Luo teamed up with Wawa, and the two waited for a match on the national server. Wawa sent a voice chat request and Shi Luo accepted. Wawa was still sobbing. You guys were absolutely vicious today. Too vicious. You guys ripped me apart and I had absolutely no way to fight back. The two entered the map, and Shi Luo said, that was the point. Wawa cried, what did I ever do to provoke you? Shi Luo said. It had nothing to do with you. It had barely been a year since Wawa entered the business. He really had no idea about the old scores Shi Luo and Yu Sui needed to settle. He said ignorantly, if not with me then with who? Even an idiot could see that you were targeting me today. Shi Luo bought the basic equipment. Didn't I already apologize? Okay. Wawa sighed. I'm not blaming you. If it were me, I would have also gone for the medic. I absolutely sucked in the early part of the match. I just can't do it the way Yu Shin does it. My skills just can't keep up. His skills just blows me away. Shi Luo paused. Shi Luo stopped talking and he took Wawa to clear the fog. Wawa was still feeling regretful. Sigh, it was the same type of play but the way Yu Shin plays is so natural and spontaneous. When he demonstrated it to me, I could just swoon. Really, he's a medic but he can suppress the opponent's strikers. He got my blood boiling. I was so fearless and raring to go try it out against your team and then you guys just ripped me to shreds. Shi Luo killed one of their opponents but he still did not speak. Yu Shin is really amazing. Sigh, I give up. I'm not gonna play as an assassin type medic, I can't do it. I'll stick with being an honest milk tank. Shi Luo seemed to be absent-minded. You're already pretty good. There's no need for you to copy someone else's style. Wawa sighed, our captain told me to learn, how can I not listen? Our captain said that while I still haven't finalized my style, I should try out other styles. And that's what I'm doing. I was actually afraid of Yu Shin but I totally didn't expect that he'd be so nice. I kept asking so many things but he never grew impatient. It's probably just to give our captain face, though. Wawa said helplessly, Yu Shin's a good teacher, but I'm a lousy student. I'm doing my best but if you can't learn, you can't learn. Shi Luo said, just let it be then. The captain also thinks I should just forget about it, but our manager hasn't given up. He insists that I continue practicing. Whatever, it'll be to my benefit anyway. If they want me to practice, then I'll practice, Wawa said somewhat miserably. Say Shij, can I practice with you? Let me play in the front row and you take care of me. Shi Luo had been lost in thought when he was listening to Wawa. Once he had recovered his senses, he said, alright. They had absolutely thrashed Wawa on the field that morning, so Shi Luo felt a bit guilty. So when Wawa said that he wanted to use him to practice, he didn't think twice and immediately agreed. However, not even 10 minutes later, he was already regretting his decision. The reason wasn't him but because Wawa's play as an assassin type medic just effing sucked. Except for when he played his side account for live broadcasts, Shi Luo hasn't come across such a SHT medic in a very long time. From the very first day, Shi Luo started playing this game he has never cursed at medic. But today might just be the day he breaks that vow. Shi Luo gritted his teeth and swallowed back the words into his stomach, far. You're too far ahead. Can't you judge first how many people the other team has? Should slow down, okay? West. Go to the west side? Did you hear me? Go. Didn't you hear me? The two of them teamed up to play matches for 2 hours and Shi Luo's main account's rank on the national server bungee jumped from the top and dove to no 17. After playing a match, Shi Luo took a look at the list of the top 100 on the national server. When he saw that he dropped to 19, he was rendered completely speechless. Shi Luo didn't want to curse him out in public so he lit a cigarette. Wawa tread very carefully. Siege? Should we still continue to play? Shi Luo blew out some smoke. After a long beat of silence, he said, do you know how many high-score matches I have to play every week to keep my no 1 position on the national server? I had kept my no 1 ranking for 4 months now. If I hadn't lost my position today, I would have broken the record in just half a month more. Shi Luo began to doubt if Wawa was as honest a person as he thought. Are you playing me? Wawa wanted to cry. I'd love it if I were just playing you. But I'm just really SHT at this. You go smoke. I think you probably need to cool off. Shi Luo held his cigarette in his mouth. He shook his head, no, look for Captain Gu and ask him to practice with you. I'm not going with you anymore. Wawa was so worried, his stomach began to hurt. He quit practicing with me a long time ago. My assassin type medic actually managed to repulse a striker. Shi Luo said, I consider you as one of my few friends so I sincerely advise that you give up. I think so too. Obviously, assassin type medics can only be discovered and not sought. I don't want to keep doing this. Hey. Wawa suddenly remembered something. Shij, weren't you an assassin type medic before you changed to a striker? Shi Luo took a drag off his cigarette and murmured vaguely. What a rare talent. Why did you change jobs? What a waste. Wawa thought for a moment, and then said, but then, you've also reached the top as a striker, so that can't be considered a waste. But there's so few good medics, and assassin-type medics are even rarer. It's a pity. Shi Luo withdrew from the map. There's nothing regrettable about it. Wawa still felt sore. It's nice when you know you've got strong backing. But why did you change occupations? It really is too bad. Shi Luo ignored Wawa. After smoking a cigarette, he was ready to shut down his computer. Wawa, though, was still asking his question and raising a ruckus. Shi Luo couldn't help laughing. Even I myself don't think it's a waste. So why are you feeling distress in my place? It just feels like such a waste. Wawa beat his breast and stamped his feet, feeling vexed. If you hadn't changed occupations, you wouldn't have transferred clubs. You'd still be in essence medic. It would have great to be your sub. I would have happily served as Shiji's footman. Ah! Shi Luo scoffed. Wawa's curiosity was piqued. So tell me, why did you change jobs? Shi Luo lit another cigarette. Because. Shi Luo was annoyed. There was an official statement back then. Check it out for yourself. Wawa said anxiously, come on, just tell me. I entered the scene late, so I have no idea about these stuff that happened a long time ago. Shi Luo said, the official statement goes like. Shi Luo thought back on it and slowly said, evil's desired path of development in the game no longer coincides with that of a medic's. To force him to continue on as such would simply cause suffering, and so. Wawa probed out, wait a minute, allow me to translate it to plain English. Evil has gotten sick of playing medic, so he has decided to quit being a medic, right? Shi Luo said, you can actually translate that even more plainly. Wawa reinterpreted, I'm not playing a f-king medic. Lazy won't be adding blood anymore. Wawa nodded his approval. Awesome. Real awesome. Wawa gasped in admiration, giving a slow, dazed applause. Actually, every once in a while, I get the same idea. But I don't dare to actually go through with it. Shi Luo smiled and continued. After thorough discussion between Evil and the management of the Innocent Club's Fog branch, it was agreed upon by both parties that Evil Xuanzu will transfer to Striker from today. Because Innocent's roster for Strikers is currently full, the club will make further arrangements in accordance with Evil's personal wishes. Shi Luo smoked his cigarette. End of statement. While chatting with Shi Luo, Wawa had opened the official website of the Fog China Division League. He entered Shi Luo's player ID to search for the official statement from 2 years ago, and finally found it. Although Shi Luo was still a rookie at that time, he was already a half-celebrity. At that time, the league management treated the announcement of Shi Luo's change in jobs very seriously. A poster had even been drawn up for it. In the poster, 2 game characters stood behind Shi Luo. Standing in the shadow and holding a 3-faced 6-cornered photon shield was Shi Luo's previous medic game character. Standing under the spotlight, carrying a submachine gun was Shi Luo's newly built striker. Wawa said hesitantly, although I can understand being sick of playing a medic, but at the time you didn't know if you'd be able to become a top player after changing to a striker. Changing so hastily. That was to us. Shi Luo said it for him. Too stupid. Shi Luo took another puff of his cigarette. Back then, I was an idiot, alright. But that's not actually the reason why I changed jobs. In an instant, Wawa became even more curious. They why? Shi Luo stubbed out his cigarette. I'm not going to tell you. I'm off. Shi Luo then shut down the computer and went to sleep. Once Shi Luo said he was off, he left immediately. The fans who were listening in on the 2 people chatting in Wawa's live broadcast room suddenly exploded. Wawa was afraid he might have said something wrong accidentally while he was swept by Shi Luo's rhythm. He turned off the live broadcast in a flurry. In Innocent Team's training room, Captain Kugan got up to pour himself a glass water. Wawa took off his headphones and asked offhandedly, "Captain, when Shi Shin was in our team, why did he suddenly change to a striker?" Gu Gan paused in his steps and looked at the person who had been playing with his phone by the window. "Because that guy caused trouble for him." Wawa was stunned. "Yu Shin?" Wawa thought about it and said, "No, that's not possible. At that time, didn't Yu Shin already transfer to the European region? How could he?" "I was precisely because they were no longer on the same team," Gu Gan said calmly. "At the time, we had a scheduled practice match with a European team. It just so happened that we played against Yu Sui's new team. Shi Luo was our team's medic. We played 3 matches and lost 3 matches. Shi Luo was targeted throughout all 3 of the matches. By the last game, Shi Luo hadn't been able to step foot outside the resurrection stone except during the beginning of the game." Wawa was stricken. "Isn't that way worse than what happened to me today?" "What happened to you today was nothing," Gu Gan said. "The European team stepped all over our resurrection stone. They'd kill as soon as a player resurrected. Resurrect and kill, resurrect and kill. And the one who had their medic kill our players was him, Yu Sui. At the time, by the last match we had already retreated from the map. We had absolutely no means to fight back, so it didn't make sense to waste time. Only Shi Luo hadn't retreated. He alone remained on the map. He'd stand up and die, stand up and die. In fog, the player's character will incur some scars and bloodstains after being injured. Even if the character was resurrected during the same match, the scars and blood on the character will not disappear. If a player was continuously killed and resurrected." Wawa imagined that scene and asked, "How many times did he die?" 34 times. Gu Gan looked at Yu Sui, who was still playing with his mobile phone. "Right?" Wawa was incredulous. 34 times? Yu Sui was still looking at his phone, and he hummed his assent. In that game that year, Shi Luo's in-game character was horrifically wounded. Half of its face was soaked in blood, scarred beyond recognition. Wawa struggled to say at the time, he'd just had his contract sold by Yu Shin. "If this were a shonen manga, you'd be a villain." Yu Sui had been a bit lost in thought, and then he smiled to himself and said, "Even when not in a shonen manga, I had already long been a villain." "Ah, that's right," Gu Gan said. "If I remember correctly, there was only 2 times when the haters in the domestic esports circle united together against a common enemy. The first time was when Yu Sui led away his team to Europe, and the second time was because Shi Luo had been sold twice within 3 months. All the haters in the esports forums worked together to come out with sensational videos, and they photoshopped funeral pictures and posted it everywhere. Everything just shy of hiring hitmen and having them waste Yu Sui's hands." Gu Gan quietly summed it up. "The first person to unify the esports haters, whisper, Yu Sui." Yu Sui smiled. "That should be my calling card." Wawa gave Yu Sui an awkward look. He didn't dare joke around with Yu Sui, so he simply continued playing. Chapter 6. For the next few days after Shi Luo and Wawa's double team live broadcast, terror reigned over the forums. Many old long-buried matters were unearthed and brought to light to once again to be criticized. Yu Sui's fans, Shi Luo's fans, Yu Sui's haters and Shi Luo's haters mixed all together as they fought and quarreled, raising quite a ruckus. During a lull in their training session, Shi Luo opened the forum pages. Zhao Feng saw Shi Luo's computer screen and hurried to block his view. "What's wrong with playing a bit when you're free? What are you looking through the forums for? Are you tired of living? I'm not afraid of being insulted online." Shi Luo slowly pulled up the forum page. "I've long been at the center of controversies, facing off against these haters. I'm used to it." Zhao Feng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This kind of mentality of yours can actually be considered as quite good. Fine ba. By the way, I have something to discuss with you." Zhao Feng glanced at the other people in the training room. Shi Luo understood. He pushed close the keyboard tray, and followed Zhao Feng out of the training room. The two went to the conference room next door. Shi Luo casually pulled out a chair and sat down. He put his hands in his trouser pockets, and casually put his feet on the table. Is it about the live broadcasts again? I can't continue to add any more hours. 30 hours a month is the limit. Feng leaned against the table and smiled helplessly. Other teams have their players signed for 45 hours. Some for even 60 hours. Shi Luo shook his head. It's impossible. You don't want me revealing too much of my play, so you only let me play just a few games on the live broadcasts. Now, you want me to add more time? You're the one who's contradicting yourself. Feng knew that he was in the wrong. He also knew that Shi Luo wasn't short of money, but the club had no other means to motivate its people other than with money. He had no other alternative but to say, well, can you at least not squeeze in all the 30 hours at the end of the month? Shi Luo absent-mindedly gave a perfunctory nod. I have one other thing to tell you. Feng pulled out a chair and sat down, his tone lightened. I see that you've been checking the forums on your own, and that's fine. But I'm going to tell you this directly so that no mishaps might happen if you find out about it at the last moment. Shi Luo frowned as he looked at Feng. Feng slowly said, it's just that, it's your former teammate, Chen Huo. Feng watched Shi Luo's face carefully, and said, he'll also be coming back soon. Shi slightly raised his chin, and without the slightest change in his expression, simply said, oh. Feng was a little surprised. You're not upset? Shi Luo's tone was calm, just as I expected. Feng smiled. How'd you guess? Shi Luo said lightly. Luo didn't keep his mouth shut. After talking to him that time, it was all clear. Feng was perplexed. Did you mean that time when you and Luo teamed up on the live broadcast? Shi Luo leaned against the back of his chair and stared blankly at the ceiling of the conference room, saying, yeah. Feng didn't understand at all. I went to watch that live broadcast of you two. I watched that from beginning to end, without skipping a single minute. Why didn't I notice anything? Shi Luo turned his head and glanced at Feng. His eyes narrowed slightly, and said, want to hear how? Feng was really curious and nodded. Tell me. There's no training right now anyway. Shi Luo took out his mobile phone and glanced at it. There was still time. He threw the mobile phone onto the conference table. Then next time, don't pressure me to do the live broadcast. Feng couldn't help himself. He hesitated and then nodded. Okay. I won't pressure you to do it. When Shi Luo got his assurance, he put his feet down from the table. He looked at Feng. Since Innocent has Whisper, why did Luo come up to play that day? Feng hesitated. Maybe they were afraid of exposing too much of his tactics. Every season, whenever we're already a shoo-in for the playoffs, we have substitutes replace you. That's because we're afraid of exposing too much of your play before the playoffs. It was a warm-up game that had no bearing on the points. Doesn't it make sense that they wouldn't put in Whisper? It makes sense. Shi Luo nodded. Even with Yu Sui, I can understand why Innocent wouldn't sell off Luo directly. Maybe it's out of friendship, or maybe they wanted more kinds of plays. Yu Sui's signature is an assassin-type medic. Luo has always been a milk tank medic. They have two completely different types of medics. They already have good routines. But in that case, why did Captain Gu still force Luo to learn from Yu Sui? Did he want to assimilate the two types of play into one? Feng was dazed. That. Naturally, it's because Yu Sui is the best medic. You've said it yourself. He's the best. Then what does Luo need to practice for? He can't ever be as good as Yu Sui. Shi Luo's lips ticked up in a mocking smile. Captain Gu has already given up, but the senior executives haven't. They're still forcing Luo to learn. Even now, Luo is still dropping on the national server list. What for? Feng said dryly. What could it possibly be for? Because they're worried. They're trying to make the most of their time. They're getting Luo to do his very best to learn within this limited time. Shi Luo stared at Zhao Feng with narrowed eyes. What do you say has got Innocent's top management so anxious? Why is Chen Huo coming home now? Zhao Feng gulped. Why? Shi Luo looked down and said coldly, because Yu Sui will soon leave NSN. Zhao Feng accidentally let out a cough. He hadn't actually joined NSN. He's teaching Wewa now just to pay back Captain Gu. He's just stopping over at NSN. Shi Luo stood up. If nothing goes amiss, Yu Sui will be forming his own team right away. No, Zhao Feng's eyes were filled with shock and he looked at Shi Luo incredulously. How did you guess this? Shi Luo turned back around and looked up and down at Zhao Feng. There's also no need for you to pretend to be shocked. Since he's forming a team, he must have already submitted an application to the league. It's normal that I wouldn't know, but you're a team manager. Don't tell me you haven't heard of any rumors? Zhao Feng subconsciously avoided Shi Luo's eyes and forced a laugh. What would I know? If you really don't know anything, then why are you trying to probe me out now? Why check out Wewa's live broadcast with me? That's 3.5 hours of recording. Do you have that much free time to be watching Wewa getting me killed? Shi Luo closely examined Zhao Feng, pierced through the last layer of feigned ignorance. Chen Huo is a striker. Yu Sui is going to form a new team, and he's still missing another striker. You're worried. You're worried that Yu Sui has already contacted me, so you use the live broadcast as an excuse to sound me out. Shi Luo put his hands in his trouser pockets. If there's anything wrong with what I said, point it out to me now and I'll immediately sign a contract for 60 hours of live broadcasting a month. Even though he'd been seen through, Zhao Feng wasn't the least bit embarrassed. He shook his head and smiled. Shi Luo, that's what I really like about you, you're clever. You're young and you usually don't talk much, but in fact, you clearly know the score. In this aspect you're really much better than your peers. Shi Luo mockingly laughed at himself and turned to walk out the door. Despite being seen through, Zhao Feng wasn't ashamed. He simply asked, then Yu Sui. Relax. Shi Luo held the handle of the meeting room door. After a while he said, from the beginning, he's never contacted me. Once out of the conference room, Shi Luo's fingertips felt a little numb. He pulled out the Bluetooth headset from his trouser pocket and stuffed it into his ear. For a while, he just closed his eyes and leaned against the wall. It was only once he had calmed down his emotion that he returned to the training room. Trainings still went on as usual and preseason matches continued. No matter how fierce the recent online disputes were, Shi Luo's condition during games was always stable. During the following half-month of preseason games, Ayak was scheduled for 4 games and they won all 4 games. Including the match against NSN, Ayak has now won 5 games in a row. Ayak took the lead and quickly left the other teams in the dust, firmly securing first place in the league's preseason games. 2 preseason games were played daily. On this day, NSN was set to battle against Madblade and Ayak would play against Worker B in the second half. Although they weren't directly playing against each other, Ayak and NSN will inevitably appear at the same venue at around the same time. This time, Zhao Feng's conflicted mood was obviously much stronger than that of Shi Luo's. From the moment he entered the stadium, Zhao Feng became hypervigilant. He stuck closely by Shi Luo's side, refused help from any of the staff, and took care of everything by himself. He was guarded against everyone, for fear that behind that friendly and gentle face lay one of Yu Sui's planted agents. They would take advantage of a single moment of carelessness and with their glib tongues, whisk off Shi Luo. Shi Luo watched as Zhao Feng carefully checked whether the label of his water bottle hid some notes. He made as if to speak and then stopped. Shi Luo, with the very best of intentions, wanted to say something to Zhao Feng. Don't worry, I didn't lie to you. He's been in China for more than half a month already. There had been so many chances, but Yu Sui, truly, from beginning to end, never tried to get in touch with him. There hasn't even been a single hint of it. Ayak's game was in the second half and there was more than enough time still. Shi Luo was in the waiting room, lying on the sofa. He had a baseball cap pulled down very low and obscuring half his face, but he still felt out of sorts. Shi Luo took a deep breath, compulsively taking out his earphones and putting them on before he was finally able to relax a little. After a moment, Shi Luo, who was just finally starting to feel a bit better, heard rustling beside him. He impatiently opened his eyes and saw Feng hesitantly trying to feel through his backpack. Shi Luo took off the headphone from one ear and frowned. "What are you doing?" Feng withdrew his hand in an instant, and smiled. "I don't know what brand of dried fruit the staff just gave you. I was afraid you wouldn't be used to eating that, so I was checking it for you." Shi Luo held back his anger. He took out the dried fruit from the bag himself, dropped it on the table, and then closed his eyes once again. After inspecting the dried fruit, Feng said helplessly, "Don't be angry, you know what I'm worried about. At the slightest word from Yu Sui, you'd definitely go with him. I'm just being careful." Shi Luo opened his eyes a crack and he said coldly, "I'll go with him at just the slightest word? Am I cheap? Is there cheap written on my face?" Feng laughed in spite of himself. "The way you're saying it makes it sound terrible. That's not what I said. Don't get angry, don't get angry. You'll have to go on in a while, so don't get angry. You sleep, sleep. I definitely won't touch your stuff anymore." Shi Luo pressed down his anger, turned up the volume and closed his eyes again. Half an hour later, Innocent won the game in the first half and it was finally Ayak and Worker B's turn. The overall strength of the Worker B team was in the lower reaches of the league, and Shi Luo and his teammates ended the game decisively in 23 minutes. There wasn't anything newsworthy about defeating a lower level team, so after being asked a few bland questions, the 4 Ayak team members went backstage and headed to their lounge. Coincidentally, in the not so spacious corridor, everyone once again ran into the Innocent team. Only this time, Yu Sui wasn't around. Shi Luo raised his hand to say hello to Gugan and hadn't yet taken 2 steps when Gugan called out, "Shi Luo." When Shi Luo stopped, the other 3 members of Ayak looked around and seeing that it had nothing to do with them, left to return first to the lounge. Shi Luo carried his peripherals bag over his shoulder. He tilted his head and asked, "What is it?" Gugu said, "Chen Huo's back. He just got off the plane. I reserved a place for a welcome dinner. His old friends are going." Understanding what things were taboo for Shi Luo, Gugan let him know in advance. "Yu Sui, of course, will be there. Will you be going?" Shi Luo looked at Gugan indifferently. My relationship with Chen Huo before was just so-so. It seemed that Gugan had already anticipated that Shi Luo would answer this way. Gugan was only extending the invitation out of courtesy. After hearing this, he made to leave. Shi Luo said, "I'll go." Chapter 7. At 8 o'clock in the evening, at the top floor of the club where Innocent often had their get-togethers, a group of internet-addicted teenagers entered the private room in 2s and 3s. They had just eaten hot pot and they were now lying on the sofa, paralyzed in a food coma. When Yu Sui had returned to China, he had done so quietly. The pro players he'd had good relationships with before were completely unaware until the news broke out. They hadn't had the chance to meet up. So this time, they took advantage of Chen Huo's return to gather together, making this a welcome dinner for the both of them. "Oh." Chen Huo spread his legs flat, feeling very satisfied. "I had been dreaming of that hot pot for so long. That was great. Hey, what are you all being so awkward for? Come on, sing." Yu Yan, Gugan and these old guys were all playing on their mobile phones. No one paid attention to Chen Huo being noisy. Wawa, Sinran, and the few newcomers stared at this congregation of so many great gods and couldn't relax. They pulled back, huddled together and drank, too embarrassed to sing. Chen Huo got up and reserved a dozen songs. He then shoved the microphone to Wawa's chest and ordered beer and snacks from the server. With that done, he sat back down on the sofa. Chen Huo looked around and sighed, "I was pretty popular back then. When I came back today, there weren't any fans to greet me at the airport. Fine, that's to be expected, but why are only a handful of you guys here? Whatever. Let's forget about sad stuff like this. All the brothers who came here today are my true brothers. Together, we shall walk down The old guys as before, still played on their respective phones, ignoring Chen Huo. A few of the newbies hurriedly accompanied Chen Huo to drink. Chen Huo scoffed at their soft drinks and everybody changed to beer after making a show of initial resistance. Chen Huo downed half a can of cold beer and shakily patted Wewa's shoulder. "What's your name?" "Wewa, right?" "Wewa. From now on you shall be my deity." "You. The little man over there. What are you called?" "Come here. You think there's not enough people?" Gu Gan glanced at Chen Huo. "I forgot to mention, Shi Luo will be here in a while." Yu Sui, who had his head bowed as he fiddled with his phone, suddenly stopped. "Shi Luo?" Chen Huo was dazed. He looked around and said, "I didn't notice, but this club does have a security check, right? If he comes here with a steel pipe, security will stop him, won't they? Gu Gan calmly said, "Not that they'd be able to. You've experienced for yourself the way he fights, haven't you?" "It's precisely because I've experienced it that I'm scared. 10 of me wouldn't be enough to beat that little bastard." Chen Huo collapsed. He took a look at Yu Sui, and subconsciously gulped. "Let me make this clear now. For every grievance someone is responsible, for every debt there is a debtor, okay? He should look for who he came here to look for. Don't go involving me in this." Yu Sui looked back down at his phone. "Wimp." Chen Huo rubbed his neck and couldn't help grumbling to Gu Gan, "You couldn't have left well enough alone? Why are you looking for trouble trying to provoke him?" "I didn't expect him to agree to come. But I was also hoping that he would. Now that you're back, you're going to meet him sooner or later." Gu Gan was looking at Chen Huo but was addressing Yu Sui. "Is it fun having things this strained? Wouldn't it be better to clear up the misunderstandings as soon as possible?" Naturally, Yu Sui was clear on Gu Gan's intentions. He shook his head helplessly and sighed. "The problem between us is that there is no misunderstanding." Yu Sui looked at Gu Gan. With that sharp mind of his, could I have deceived him? What could I have hidden from him? Gu Gan stopped and didn't continue to talk. Someone was singing and it was very loud in the private room. Though not far from where they were, the children didn't hear what the three had said. Wewa took a few cans of beer and placed them on the small table in front of Gu Gan. He looked at the three people who weren't looking so well, and asked dumbly, "You're not gonna drink?" "Drink. I'll drink." Chen Huo had a flash on inspiration. "Yeah. I'm gonna get myself drunk and then I'm gonna find myself a place to pretend to sleep. I don't think he'll drag me up just to beat." Even Gu Gan was starting to lose patience with Chen Huo. "Can you stop being so panicky? What do you know?" Chen Huo opened a can of beer and letting out some of the spirit. "That little whelp and #K2026, hiss and #K2026, don't remind me." Wewa was at a loss. "Are you talking about Shij? Shij is really nice." Chen Huo looked Wewa up and down. "Wewa, you have a good relationship with Shi Luo?" Wewa nodded. "Shishin took care of me when I first started. He might be a bit cold but he really is nice." Chen Huo looked at Wewa in disbelief. He just couldn't imagine that scene. He shook his head. "Anyway, he wasn't the least bit nice to me. Do you want to know what he was like before?" Chen Huo hadn't finished speaking when the door to the private room opened. Seeing who had come in, the private room quieted down instantly. Chen Huo's face stiffened and he gulped down the drink in his mouth. He thought to himself, "It's okay. At least, he didn't bring a steel pipe." Shi Luo had changed into casual clothes and had a baseball cap on backwards. He looked indifferently around the private room and while gazing fixedly, headed straight for Chen Huo. He picked up a can of beer and pulled the tab open. With a slight chin raise, he emptied the can in one go. Chen Huo's Adam's apple bobbed, and he said hoarsely. Then I'll join you for a drink of two. I drink really slow so, you should sit down first. Shi Luo put the empty beer can on the table and with a blank expression, walked over to the empty bar counter and ordered a few cans of beer from the server. Chen Huo looked stiffly at Gu Gan and said in a broken whisper. Did he just give me a welcome? Gu Gan couldn't bear to look straight at him. He pushed Chen Huo to sit down on the sofa and said to the newcomers in the team. You guys play amongst yourselves. The newbies continued to sing and play amongst themselves. Gu Gan looked at Shi Luo's back, hesitated but still decided to say nothing. The beers in front of Chen Huo suddenly went down a few cans. Wawa took a few more cans and handed one to Yu Sui as well. Yu Sui had been lost in thought. Upon seeing this, he smiled. Thanks, but I don't drink. Wawa was surprised. Chen Huo waved it away saying, Don't worry about it. He won't touch even a drop of alcohol. Wawa said hurriedly, It's all right, I understand. I'm actually not good with alcohol either. We're the same. No, it's not the same. Chen Huo reached his limit and gave a burp. The amount he drank. Chen Huo thought back to that year and became upset from what he remembered. That year. This, and this. Beacon used his chin to point to everyone in the private room inside. Everyone in this room, and add to that those who retired this past 2 years, combine us all together, and we still wouldn't be able to outdrink this guy. Who do you think Yu Shin is? He's the little prince of Hinshang Road. I have known him for so many years and I have never seen him drunk. Wawa looked up at Yu Sui in surprise. He whispered, Then why? Yu Sui frowned slightly, and threw a look at Chen Huo. Chen Huo smacked his lips and continued, How do you say it? Ah, yeah, the bell is past his prime. Your Yu Sui saw his health report at age 19 and decided to quit smoking, give up drinking and refrain from speaking profanities. From then on, he became a good boy, who will one day find a good woman to marry. Wawa was even more shocked. Yu Shin also used to smoke? Beside them, Gu Gan said, he was a chain smoker. Chen Huo nodded, and added, the kind that sneaks off between games to take a smoke in the toilet. Wawa looked reverently at Yu Sui. Your addiction was so bad, but when you said you'd quit, you really did. As expected from Yu Shin. Was there something wrong with your health back then? Was it something serious? Chen Huo's face was solemn. Massive hemorrhage, we almost lost him. Wawa suddenly paled. Yu Sui had no choice but to say. It was effing gastric bleeding. Oh, yeah, gastric bleeding. Chen Huo pointed to his own stomach and sighed. Here, there was a lot of bleeding. Even his face was deathly pale for a whole month. Fortunately there wasn't anything else the matter. Wawa breathed a sigh of relief. That's good then. It's great, but from then on, he was no longer allowed to eat or drink a lot of things. Else, it's going to be a month-long emergency room tour again. Chen Huo sat up and took the beer that Wawa had placed in front of Yu Sui. He opened the can and drank a couple of mouthfuls. If you want to see your Yu Shin drink, you'll have to wait for him to drink a toast when he gets married, bah. Only the future Mrs. Yu will ever have the honor of making your Yu Shin break his abstinence. Wawa instantly seized the keyword. Married. Do you have a girlfriend? Are you getting married? Chen Huo had just blurted out these things that came to mind. But seeing Wawa was so excited, he smiled. Wouldn't that be a matter for the future? When the time comes, would you toast to the lovely couple? Wawa was excited. Of course I will. Not far from them, in front of the bar, Shi Luo had his back to everyone. He emptied out the contents of a can of beer in one swig. Unfortunately, Wawa will chattered on and on. I didn't know about this. I'm sorry, Yu Shin. You really need to be careful about gastric bleeding. Only Mrs. Yu would be worthy of such risk. If Yu Shin's future girlfriend finds out about this, she'll be really moved. Yu Shin would only drink for her. It's really sweet when you think about it. It was like Shi Luo's face had iced over. He opened another can of beer and once again, emptied it in one go. Then with a little pressure from his fingers, crumpled the empty can flat. Without looking, he threw it over his shoulder and into the concealed wastebasket. The wastebasket was originally decorative. It was completely empty and the smashed can made a loud bang as it landed. The chattering Wiwa was closest to the basket and he got quite the scare. Chen Huo was quite a distance away from Wiwa and didn't notice anything. In true straight guy fashion, he said. It's downright miserable. Now, he can only ever drink once in his entire lifetime. What's so sweet about this? Wiwa's attention was instantly drawn back. With eyes sparkling, he said, this once in a lifetime chance, he would only use it for her. Yu Shin would only risk drinking for one person alone, isn't that sweet? Chen Huo was disdainful. Sweet, my ass. Yu Sui's brows knit slightly, raised his eyes and stared at Shi Luo's back. Shi Luo had already drank several cans of beer in a row, and his eyes were already a little unfocused. He rubbed his eyes, slowly raised his hand, and the server in the private room promptly walked over. The server stooped slightly, and Shi Luo leaned in and whispered a few words. The waiter nodded and went out. Shi Luo took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. He held one between his lips, lit it and took a deep drag. Seeing how practiced Shi Luo seemed at lighting that cigarette, Yu Sui's brows furrowed slightly. He tried to resist but still turned his head to look at Gu Gan. When did he learn how to smoke? Gu Gan realized that he meant Shi Luo and asked in reply, didn't he smoke before? Yu Sui shook his head. Gu Gan said, he was already smoking when he came to our team 2 years ago. Yu Sui took a sip of his watermelon juice. That's young. Chen Huo turned to him and scoffed, you have the gall to say that about other people? How old were you when you started smoking? Do you even remember? Yu Sui said, no, I don't remember. So? So, nothing. He's also all grown up now and he has gotten by well enough. This isn't any of your business now, is it? Huo Chan completely didn't care. If he wants to smoke, let him smoke. If he wants to drink, let him drink. It's none of your business. Chen Huo said, besides, people change as they grow. You can't even guess what he wants now. Then what are you worrying about? Yu Sui stared at Shi Luo's back and tried his best that aura of foreboding he could feel in air. He said to himself, that I can't figure out what he wants. Might be for the best. Yu Sui's sixth sense has always been the kind that worked well about bad tidings but never about good ones. It was the same this time. 10 minutes later, the server placed a tray on Yu Sui's table. The tray was filled with 10 large glasses of an unknown drink. Chen Huo had been talking to Gu Gan about the transfer period. When he turned to look at it, he was confused and asked, what's this? The server hesitated, distilled vodka. This is actually what we use to mix drinks. It has a proof of over 90%. We don't recommend that you drink it directly. No one would want to drink that directly. Chen Huo was at a complete loss. Who ordered it? Shi Luo extinguished his cigarette and came over with a can of beer. He looked calmly at Yu Sui, and said, I did. Chen Huo and Wiwa looked at each other in dismay. Yu Sui put away the phone and exhaled softly. Finally. Chapter 8. Half the private room grew quiet in an instant. The people who were farther away didn't actually hear the conversation at their table, but it was as if the heavy atmosphere spread in an instant. Everyone noticed something was up and they all looked over, one after the other. For a while, the private room was as quiet as a library. No one was clear on the details of Yu Sui and Shi Luo's relationship. Their matters, their debts of gratitude and grievances, were just those which could be seen on the surface. Their actual thoughts were never made public. To say that these two got along about as well as fire and water would be understating their relationship. If Shi Luo were to take out a watermelon knife this instant to have it out with Yu Sui, no one would be too surprised. From the moment they learned that Yu Sui had returned to China, everyone had the vague feeling that this would happen sooner or later. One by one, the people who were singing, drinking, and playing dice stopped and looked surreptitiously at them with bated breaths, their nerves somewhat keyed up. Shi Luo was already half drunk. The redness on his neck had spread all the way into the low neckline of his t-shirt, enhancing the wicked air about him. Shi Luo raised his hand and rubbed his neck. He reached out with his long leg to bring over a low stool. With legs bent, he sat in front of Yu Sui, facing across from him with the table between them. "You've already been back for so long." Shi Luo stared at Yu Sui intently. He slowly pulled open the tab on his can of beer while saying, "I haven't been able to properly greet Yu Shen." Without waiting for Yu Sui to speak, Chen Huo interrupted with a smile. "Well, aren't we all greeting each other now? Hey, your game last week was absolutely ruthless. I replayed the game from your perspective. It was clear that you were going for Waiwa, I'm telling you." Shi Luo refused to be distracted and treated Chen Huo as if he wasn't even there. He looked at Yu Sui and asked, "Is Yu Shen forming a new club?" Yu Sui looked at Shi Luo. He was surprised but then dismissed it. Shi Luo really was too smart. Gu Gan vigilantly watched the already intoxicated Shi Luo. He asked quietly, "Shi Luo, I think you've had a bit too much to drink. Maybe I should call your team assistant for you? Or I could take you back. You can talk about this some other day." Gu Gan had once looked after Shi Luo. Although Shi Luo had become even more reclusive in the past 2 years, he has always respected Gu Gan. This time though, Shi Luo couldn't attend to him. Shi Luo turned a deaf ear to what he was saying. He only had Yu Sui in his eyes. "Yu Shen, you'll build a new club. I'm right, aren't I?" Yu Sui knew that he could no longer avoid the matter, and after a moment, said, "Yes." Shi Luo nodded and said to himself, "Look, I guessed correctly again." Shi Luo took a sip of his beer and asked, "Then, are you still missing a striker?" Everyone was stupefied. The players sitting some distance away looked at each other helplessly. What does Shi Luo mean by this? Could it be that he wanted to join the Yu Sui's team? Haven't you two decided long ago to grow old and die without having any dealings with each other? Just how much has he had to drink to compel him to take the initiative to ask Yu Sui if they still needed strikers? If these two ended up in the same team, wouldn't a single inappropriate remark be enough to get someone stabbed? Wouldn't that team simply be an abyss of extreme misery? Gu Gan and Chen Huo looked at each other. They didn't understand what Shi Luo meant by this. Just a while ago, wasn't this little wolf cub just raring to bite Yu Sui to death? Compared to the shock of the crowd, Yu Sui was still quite calm. After a moment of silence, he said, "We are still lacking strikers." Shi Luo stared straight into Yu Sui's eyes. "As I am now, am I now qualified to be your teammate?" Yu Sui had long ago accepted that he had no place to feel grief-stricken. But looking at Shi Luo, he unexpectedly found it a bit hard to breathe. Yu Sui nodded. "You are." Shi Luo let out a snort of laughter, his eyes full of ridicule. Chen Huo's face immediately relaxed. Shi Luo smiled for a moment and nodded. "I'm qualified in #K 2026 semicolon that's good then in #K 2026. Weren't they just playing dice over there?" Shi Luo took another sip of beer and looked at Yu Sui. "Yu Shen, would you like to play a game with me?" Chen Huo's tone wasn't good. He tried to forestall, saying, "Play what with you?" It was as though Shi Luo could only see Yu Sui as he stared fixedly at the other. His long middle finger tapped against the marble tabletop. He slowly said, "On this tray, there are 9 glasses of vodka used for mixing cocktails, the kind that has a proof of over 90%. And 1 glass of lemon tea." Shi Luo looked at Yu Sui and the corners of his mouth ticked up slightly. "Yu Shen, pick a cup and drink it all down. If you manage to pick the lemon tea, that's utter SHT. Chen Huo had come to the end of his patience. "Who'd be crazy enough to play this game with you? That's a 1 in 10 chance. Who'd be able to pick that? And say that he does manage to pick the right one, then what? He gets a cup of lemon tea? You're crazy. If you pick it out, Shi Luo interrupted Chen Huo, I'll waive the contract fee to join your new team. In an instant, there was absolute silence in the private room. Shi Luo's eyes were fierce and grim. I won't need to pay me a penny and I'll work myself to the bone for you. I will play for you for an entire season. So, are you playing or not? Chen Huo was stunned. He was dumbfounded by this sudden gift, and he instantly forgot what scolding he'd been about to deliver. Stuttering, he said, but if he chooses the vodka? Shi Luo stared at Yu Sui, who had remained silent all throughout. He could hardly conceal the hatred in his eyes. He slowly said from between gritted teeth, you have to drink the entire glass of whatever you choose. Drink the entire glass? Chen Huo exploded in anger. Are you insane? This big a glass has at least 400 milliliters in it. Normal people drinking something like that would result in some serious consequences, and you're making him drink that? Others might have no idea, but don't you know about his condition? His life is valuable, and my contract fee for an entire season is worthless? Shi Luo said calmly, high risk, high return. That's just fair. Gu Gan gave Shi Luo a warning look. Evil. Shi Luo turned a deaf ear. He felt around for a cigarette and put it between his lips. He bowed his head and lit it. Yu Shen, it's a 1 in 10 chance. Are you playing? Shi Luo took a puff of his cigarette. His tone was no longer so patient. If you're not going to play, I'll have the server take it away. Chen Huo was agitated. He won't play. Take it away. Shi Luo was about to get up. Yu Sui said, I'll play. Shi Luo's fingers trembled slightly, almost letting the ashes burn his hand. Are you thinking straight? After a moment of being stupefied, Chen Huo was completely infuriated. He said sternly, you f***ing looking to die? What about your stomach? Don't you know what could happen to you? You want to end up in the again? Yu Sui's face was serene, and he said again, I'll play. Shi Luo blew out some smoke and cursed silently. Shi Luo threw his half-smoked cigarette into his empty beer can. Let me state it clearly. Shi Luo looked up at Yu Sui, these are the rules of the game. No matter which glass you choose, you have to drink the entire glass. Yu Sui nodded. I understand. Yu Sui. Gu Gan never could have foreseen things turning out like this. Had he known Shi Luo would act like this, Gu Gan would have never invited him without permission. He frowned. Don't joke. Everyone has had a bit too much to drink. Stop with the jokes, I think it's time we wrap this up. I owe you a lot. Yu Sui took a bottle of milk someone had placed by the side of the table. He unscrewed the bottle and took a few gulps. It's no use trying to talk me out of this. I'm playing. What do you mean you're playing? What good is drinking some milk now? That's vodka. Those could be used as explosives. Chen Huo wanted to throttle the both of them. He glared fiercely at Yu Sui. He stepped in close, lowered his voice and said through clenched teeth. If you really want him, we can just get him for my yak. How much is it? We'll buy it. How much money could be worth more than your life? Yu Sui slowly shook his head. We can't buy it. Shi Luo heard it perfectly clear. He laughed mockingly. Now you want to buy? Sorry, once I walk out that door, there's no way I would join your team, ever. Chen Huo was so angry, he was about to explode. You whelp. Sitting to the side, Wawa couldn't sit still anymore. He timidly urged, Shij. Don't take this too far. Even if there was some kind of argument or misunderstanding in the past, there's no need for this to end up with someone in the hospital, right? Isn't this a bit excessive? Shi Luo ignored Wawa. Yu Sui looked down and picked up his phone to send a message to his personal doctor in China. He then set his phone aside and surveyed the 10 large transparent drinks on the table. Shi Luo had probably instructed the server earlier. Each cup was covered with a layer of fresh mint leaves used for cocktails. It completely covered any bubbles that might possibly float to the top of the drink, and it also interfered with the color of the drink. It seemed that they were afraid he'd try to guess via the alcoholic smell, and so they had also flooded the entire tray with vodka. The alcoholic smell assailed their nostrils and there was no way to differentiate. Yu Sui looked at it silently for a minute, and gave up relying on his experience to choose. The 10 glasses were so well grouped together that even the bartender wouldn't be able to tell. Chen Huo's face was flushed with anger. He said through gritted teeth, "Are you crazy? The probability is so small it would be impossible to pick it out. Haven't you understood yet? This little wolf cub is out for revenge. He wants to send you to the hospital without getting his hands dirty." Shi Luo opened himself another can of beer and didn't refute. Yu Sui looked up at Shi Luo. He saw how he was extremely adept at smoking and drinking, and was suddenly lost in thought. It's only been 2 years. Across the wide table and 9 glasses of deadly drinks, for a moment, the two looked at each other face to face. It's only been 2 years. Before, I left in a bit of a hurry, and I forgot to tell you something. Yu Sui looked at Shi Luo. It was my fault. I went back on my word. Shi Luo's eyes instantly reddened. Shi Luo had difficulty swallowing and he said in a hoarse voice, "Drink." Yu Sui nodded. He didn't bother choosing and simply picked up a large glass of drink. He quickly tipped his head back and took a drink before Chen Huo and the others could stop him. His entire person froze. "What is it? Spit it out. If it's not lemon tea, spit it out." Chen Huo was about to climb the walls in worry. "What's with that face? The car's downstairs. Get up. I'll take you to the hospital." Yu Sui slowly took another mouthful. It's lemon tea. Everyone in the private room collectively breathed a sigh of relief. They then all broke out in a cold sweat over how close they'd come to disaster. Chen Huo still couldn't believe it. He snatched it up, smelled it, and muttered, "The FCK. What's with that Huang-like luck of yours?" Yue slowly drank the entire glass of lemon tea. Shi Luo took a deep breath, set aside his beer can, and gracefully accepted his loss. "I will contact you later about the transfer. You should have your lawyers draw up the contract." Everyone in the box started to whisper amongst themselves, marveling for Yu Sui. This was no longer just plain good luck. He didn't have to spend a penny, and he managed to sign on the no-one striker on the national server. Gu Gan wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Afraid that something else might happen, he got up and said, "Okay, you can just discuss the details privately. It's getting late, let's leave matters here for now." After watching such drama, everyone was no longer in any mood to sing. One by one, everyone nodded and started to make their way out. Only Shi Luo was still sitting at the table silently, watching the remaining 9 glasses of vodka quietly on the table. "Let's go." Chen Huo's back was drenched in sweat. He had just recovered from a fright and urged Yu Sui. Go. We can discuss about this arrangement." Yu Sui's movements were sluggish. He followed the flow of people down the elevator, and then waited at the entrance lobby of the club. Chen Huo's heart was still pounding. He rubbed his chest, saying, "Scared me to death. You too. He's already gone crazy, but do you have to join him too? Normally, you treasure your life so much. What was that just now? If you really wind up in the hospital, this time it won't be as simple as just staying there for a month." No one knew what Yu Sui was thinking. He didn't say a word. "Do you think it's a good thing that he's coming over? Just now he'd been trying to make you drink to your death." The more Chen Huo thought about it, the more apprehensive he felt. Before, he already wasn't such a good kid, but he's become even more troublesome. Now, he's out for your life. Just look. This is the cub you brought back to raise back then. There was suddenly a flash of light in Yu Sui's eyes, and he turned and went back in. Chen Huo was suddenly worried. "Oh my God, what is it now? Chen Huo was about to follow Yu Sui, but Gu Gan, who had gone to the underground garage, came back and asked him for the car keys. Chen Huo couldn't attend to both things at once. While he hurriedly rummaged in his bag for the misplaced car keys to give to Gu Gan, Yu Sui had already given him the slip and entered the elevator. The elevator rose to the top floor, and with a tink the doors opened and Yu Sui stepped out and headed for the private room. In the deserted private room, Shi Luo was still there just as they'd left him. Shi Luo glanced up and frowned with obvious dissatisfaction. "You've won. Why haven't you left? Did you come back to laugh at me?" Yu Sui stared at the 9 drinks remaining on the table, his fingertips trembling slightly. Shi Luo then realized something and said sharply, "It's over, get out of here." Yu Sui turned a deaf ear and without giving Shi Luo a chance to block him, went forward and drank one of untouched glasses. Yu Sui's eyes changed instantly. His eyes trembled, and he turned to look at Shi Luo incredulously. Shi Luo's eyes were completely red as though he wanted to kill someone. He stepped forward and grabbed Yu's wrist, his voice was hoarse, and he gritted out word per word, "I said. Leave." Yu Sui's lips trembled slightly, and he slowly but firmly pushed away Shi Luo's hand. He took another glass of untouched vodka and took a sip. Yu Sui's entire person was rooted in place. After a while, Yu Sui picked up another glass once again, took a sip and put it down, took another glass, took a sip, and put it down again. Shi Luo had his jaw clenched tightly. Like this, Yu Sui, with hands trembling, took glass after glass, until he had drank from each of the remaining 9 glasses. 10 cups of drinks, each and every one of which was lemon tea. Chapter 9. 2 years ago. Yu Sui put the half-finished cup of lemon tea on the table and lay down on the bed. In the captain's dorm room of the steam base in Shanghai, all was quiet. The warm afternoon sun was just right. The windows of the room were open and the curtains swayed gently with the breeze, sweeping across the glass of lemon tea on the table. The phone on the side of the bed was constantly buzzing, and with every buzz it slowly slid a little towards the edge of the bed, little by little until finally fell to the floor. Yu Sui opened his eyes slightly, glanced down over the side of bed, and turned over to continue sleeping. An hour later, Yu Sui, who had caught up on sleep, got up, bent down, picked up the mobile phone on the ground, and put it back on the bed. Yu Sui washed his face, sat by the window and lit a cigarette. He picked up his phone and looked through it. His WeChat was filled with both useful and useless messages. Yu Sui looked through them one by one and replied to those that needed it. A little unexpectedly, Yu Sui saw several missed voice calls from Cao. Cao was a classmate and childhood friend of Yu Sui's. Although the two no longer kept in touch, their relationship has always been good. Yu Sui called back Cao, and it quickly went through. Yu Sui slowly said, "I just saw it. What's the matter?" Cao on the other end of the line sounded as though he had grabbed onto a lifesaver and said miserably, "Ancestor, why couldn't I get in touch with you? I was about to try to camp out at your doorsteps. You won't be able to find me at my house." Yu Sui smiled. "I can only go back there a few times a year. Why are you looking for me?" After exchanging a few pleasantries, Cao then tentatively asked, "Can you do me a favor?" Yu Sui took a puff of his cigarette. "What is it?" Cao sighed. "My cousin, he had a complete falling out with the family recently. Not only did he leave the house, he also isn't going to school anymore. I heard that recently he does live gaming broadcasts. My uncle's lungs are about to burst from anger. If he later becomes an internet celebrity. Well, what a way to bring honor to our ancestors, huh?" Cao's family was engaged in business, but for the past 18 generations of the family, they were all men of letters. They were a proper family with a literary reputation. They were old-fashioned and conservative. Yu Sui couldn't help but smile. But there were a lot of internet-addicted teenagers who didn't want to go to school and ran away from home. Most of Yu Sui's friends were like this. Cao said sadly, He's in high school. He'll have college entrance examinations in 2 months and his grades are not bad. If he really dropped out of school at this time, then what would you call this? And it would because of playing games, that game of yours, Fog. My God, my uncle doesn't dare tell my grandfather. He's afraid the news would send him directly to the hospital. Without waiting for Yu Sui to speak, Cao said quickly, "Hey, don't be so touchy. I'm not saying that what you do is bad. I'd be happy if he really could follow in your footsteps. But just how many can actually get into your business? And he's not even playing as a profession, he's doing live broadcasts. An anchor. Anchor, do you understand?" "I understand." Yu Sui blew out some smoke. "I occasionally broadcast live too." "What's wrong?" Cao said miserably, "This really won't do. He hasn't graduated from high school yet. Where can he go from here? Can you help?" Yu Sui said, "How can I help?" Cao said, "If he really doesn't want to study, we can't force him. He's this old now, he can't be tied down. To be honest, my cousin has been rebellious since he was a child. He has never been obedient. These past few years he's tormented my uncle so much, he's long given up already. But he can't really just be an anchor. If my grandfather knew about this, he'd be worried to death. I also convinced my uncle to take a step back and make a compromise." Cao said helplessly, "If he really likes that game so much, he could play it professionally like you, instead of trying to make a living by doing live broadcasts. I thought about how my grandfather had always liked you. If he knew my cousin was in the same profession, maybe he could accept it." Yu Sui held his cigarette between his lips, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly. "Do you think anyone who plays games can get into my line of work?" No. I know it's harder than testing into jjjwxc. Cao frantically tried to apologize. "My uncle shouted at me so much, my brain's been scrambled. My idea was to ask you to please take a look. Can you see if he has what it takes or if he's a dud?" Cao said, "If he's a dud, then that's it. But if he could develop into that direction, then he could be a professional player." Yu Sui was not optimistic. "I'm telling you now, there are 1,000 people who brag about going pro. If there's even one of them that actually has the qualifications for the job, that could already be considered as a pretty good turnout." Cao said quickly. "I understand, but it actually seems like he really can play pretty well. And he plays the same position as you do, that. Yu Sui raised an eyebrow. "A medic?" Cao slapped his thigh. "Yes." Yu Sui nodded. "Okay, send me his ID. I'll look at his ranking on the national server." Cao stuttered, "What are you talking about?" Yu Sui said tersely, "It's his game account." "Send it to me." Cao drew a blank. "Huh?" Yu Sui sighed. "You can just ask him, he'll understand." Cao said miserably, "He already blacklisted me a long time ago in #K 2026, Yuzheng couldn't do anything about it." He said, "Then send me the address to his live broadcast, and I'll go watch it." Cao sighed. "To be honest, I don't know where he's doing his live broadcasts." Yu Sui was so angry that he laughed. "Then FCK off. I can't help you." "Don't be like that." Cao said incoherently, "It's not my fault. My uncle only told me that he was working as an anchor, but he didn't tell me where. I asked my uncle and he was shaking with anger. Then he asked me back, just what the heck a live broadcast was. What could I do? I knew that you'd know, but I was afraid you were busy with competitions, so I didn't dare bother you. So, I asked my classmates who are in China. My classmates tried to explain it to me for a long time, but I really can't understand any of your gaming jargons. I searched for several days like a headless fly. My uncle and my father came to remind me again. I haven't even finished writing my group essay for the week and my head's going to explode. Yu Sui, help me out." Yu Yan lit another cigarette and shook his head. "No way, You don't know anything. Where would I even begin to look for him? You must have a way, can't you help? Kao was afraid that Yu Sui wouldn't care about it anymore, and shamelessly said, "Look. I really didn't want to bring this up. But you remember when you started your career? That year you had a falling out with your family, who gave you tuition and living expenses so that you could go to school while you were still training your skills." Yu Sui asked in reply. "How much was the tuition?" "The tuition wasn't that much, but do you want to compute your living expenses?" Kao remembered these past matters and was filled with anger. "You spent tens of thousands worth in living expenses every month. Have you forgotten whose pocket money you spent? My mom suspected that I was already providing for some starlet at my young age. PFFT. Yu Sui laughed. "I paid it back to you a long time ago, didn't I?" "Yes, you paid it back, but the blame I took for you is nothing to scoff at either. All that money I saved up for so many years by living frugally was all spent on starting your esports career." Kao's tone was unstable from anger. You can ask anyone, what kid who runs away from home lived as cushy a life as you did back then? Yu Sui really did owe Kao a debt of gratitude for this matter. He nodded helplessly. I'll think of a way." Yu Sui sighed. Kao was instantly relieved. "I can't tell you how thankful I am." Kao believed himself to be in the wrong. He chuckled. "I know you're busy, but I had no other way. I'll invite you to dinner when I return home." "Alright." Yu Sui thought to himself that it was lucky he was idle recently. "Send me his contact information." Kao hurriedly sent a bunch of information and said, "I have given you his name, age, mobile number, and QQ number. The phone is probably a dead end. It's been shut down for half a month, and he won't add any strangers to his social networking accounts. I guess you'll still need to start from his live broadcasts." Yu Jing minimized the voice call to see the messages. Shi Luo. Your surname is K and your cousin's is Shi. Since which generation has your family been green-hatted, huh? Bah. Kao mocked good-naturedly. It's not convenient to tell you the family scandal right now. I'll tell you some other time. Yu Sui never actually intended to ask. He was about to hang up when Kao hurriedly added. He's really bad-tempered. Just be patient with him, he's in his rebellious period. Said Yu Sui and then hung up. He then received several messages from Kao. Kao sent all the information he had on his cousin, even his grades from school. Yu Sui narrowed his eyes as he took a look. Shi Luo, male, 17 years old, 181 centimeters tall. Kao, being overly careful, also sent several photos. Yu Sui raised his eyebrows as he looked at the photos. Handsome. Very handsome. The 17-year-old teenager in the photo had extremely short hair that was dyed white. He had several rings on his ears. Even if he squandered away this aristocratic appearance, people could still see through his appearance into his true nature, seeing that he was indeed very handsome. The rebellious young man had eyes and brows that looked a bit wild and ruthless, almost as though his expression was telling strangers to keep away. Yu Sui gave a call to this Shi Luo. It was turned off. He added him on WeChat. There was no response. He could only begin his search from the live broadcast. Yu Sui sent a message to his club owner and former captain Ji Yanhan. He gave him a brief rundown of the situation and sent Shi Luo's name and age. He requested Ji Yanhan to ask a few people he was familiar with in the live broadcast platform companies. Maybe they could directly find Shi Luo's live broadcast room. Ji Yanhan was out discussing business, but he immediately replied after receiving the information and asked Yu Sui to wait for news. Yu Sui left his mobile phone on the bed and went to take a shower. After he took a shower, he placed the clothes he had changed out off into the clothes hamper and sent it to the base's cleaning aunt. He then took a look at his mobile phone. Ji Yanhan had already sent news back. Ji Yanhan, I couldn't find him. Either he doesn't broadcast on these mainstream live broadcast platforms, or he does, but he didn't sign a contract with them and didn't upload his real personal information, so they couldn't find him. Who is this guy? Yu Sui hadn't been expecting that at all. They couldn't find him? Yu Sui let Ji Yanhun get back to work. He told him not to mind him anymore. Then he really had to search for his live broadcast. This needed luck. It'd be great if Shi Luo was broadcasting at this time. He doesn't know how many rounds of searching he'll need to do before he bumps into him. Yu Sui really didn't want to bother with this anymore, but thinking about that home before, he couldn't refuse. That scene when he went to Cow's home and ate Cow's mother's dumplings for New Year's Eve flashed across his mind. Yu Sui sighed and headed towards the training room. Yu Sui's teammate, Chen Huo, just happened to come back from outside. When he saw Yu Sui enter the training room, he followed in. Isn't it a rest day? Are you still going to train? Yu Sui shook his head. It's a personal matter. Chen Huo shrugged his shoulders. He wasn't going to touch a computer during his hard-earned short vacation. So after walking around the training room a couple of times, he left. Yu Sui was the only one in the empty lounge. He opened the first live broadcast platform and opened the fog game category. Male, young, playing a medic. Yu Yan screened out the professional players he knew, and based on the meager information Kao provided, he began to investigate one by one. Half an hour passed. An hour passed. 3 hours passed. Yu Sui let go of the mouse, lowered his head and pinched the corner of his eyes. He was going blind. Chen Huo had come back from eating barbecue with the team next door. Seeing Yu Sui still sitting at his computer desk, he became curious and said, "You haven't opened the game client and you're not doing a live broadcast. Just what the heck are you doing?" Yu Sui said expressionlessly, "Going door to door to help my buddy find a missing child." Scary. Chen Huo was horrified. Who lost him? How old is the child? How tall? Yu Sui opened another live broadcast room. 17, 1 meter and 81. Chen Huo's face revealed shock. "I think you're losing it." "I think so too." Yu Sui took a new pack of cigarettes and drew one out using his lips. "I fking don't believe it anymore. The little bastard." Huo Chen was afraid that he'd be roped in by Yu Sui to do the work, and so he ran away on tiptoe. Yu Yan took a puff of his cigarette and continued to investigate. 2 hours later, Yu Sui looked at the live broadcast room on his screen, his face ashen. The game that was being broadcasted was Fog, alright. The live broadcaster was playing as a medic, alright. The webcam was turned on in the live broadcast room. Yu Sui looked at the picture sent by Kao on the mobile phone, and then looked at the person who was broadcasting live. That's him, alright. It's this person. There was nothing wrong. The live broadcast was also pretty popular. Logically, it should have been easy to find, but Yu Sui really wanted to type in the live chat and ask his Shi Luo, "You, a technical game anchor, why the FCK did you classify yourself under the house dance channel?" Yu Yan hadn't eaten all night. Right now, he was so angry, he was getting a stomachache. He really had expended a great deal of effort just now. After checking all the possibilities, he could only believe the impossible. Yu Sui opened the strange, more unlikely channels one by one, and then he finally saw Shi Luo's unique game interface and indifferent male face amongst a group of trembling cat-eared maids on the house dance channel. Yu Sui was so annoyed that he wanted to call the platform administrator to report the anchor's malicious miscategorization, but thought better of it and pulled his hands back. Shi Luo hadn't signed a contract, and the platform administrator had no way of controlling under which channel he placed his streams. FCK. Yu Sui took a deep breath and opened his game client. Yu Sui reopened the live broadcast room, glanced at Shi Luo's game ID and then opened the client's national server rankings. He entered 2000 Luo in the search bar. The search results came out instantly, 2000 Luo, national server ranking 179. Yu Sui was stunned. It has been less than 2 months since the new season started. At this point in time, a lot of professional players hadn't yet entered the top 300 of the national server rankings. Of course, the possibility of someone else actually playing his account couldn't be ruled out. Yu Sui closed his client and opened the live broadcast room to watch him play. Combined with a webcam image in the game being broadcasted, Yu Sui could basically rule out the possibility of someone else playing for him. He was the one playing this himself. Yu Sui watched Shi Luo play another round. He then sent a message to Cao, "I've found your cousin. There's a possibility he could become a pro gamer." Cao immediately replied back. "What do you mean by possibility? Were you able to see his ranking?" Yu Sui, a high rank doesn't necessarily mean he can play professionally. They're not necessarily related. Cao, then how can you judge? Yu Sui was too lazy to explain to this layman, saying, "There are a lot of things to ascertain." Cao replied, "Then can you help me check to make sure?" Yu Sui, "No way." After having said so, Yu Sui was about to close the live broadcast room when Cao hurriedly sent a message over, "My allowance. New Year's dumplings. Dragon Boat Festival dumplings. Mid-Autumn Festival mooncakes." Yu Sui paused and typed, "Give me a few days. I need to communicate with him myself." Cao was instantly relieved and sent another message. "Great, I wish I could contact him, but he said that he had nothing to talk about with an old man like me." "Then what? You're the same age as me. You should watch out for that." Yu Sui held back his anger. He threw the phone aside, reopened the game client, and applied for a side account. Recalling what Cao said just now, he said that he had nothing to talk about with an old man like me. When he was filling out the details, he changed his age to 15. He tried to remember the youthful trends when he was young. After incorporating it with this rebellious boy's aesthetics and interests, he quickly changed his nickname and signature. Yu Sui used a side account to send a friend request to Shi Luo in the game. He said to himself, "A career assessment has come, young man. If you don't pass this, it will be too much of a loss." At the same time, at a certain internet cafe, Shi Luo friend request notification flashed. Shi Luo opened it. One heartbroken person sent a friend request. Reason for the application: "Little Jeej, won't you ease my broken heart a little?" Shi Luo looked at the ID. His slightly sharp eyebrows twitched. The next second, he decisively pressed decline. Translator's notes: very important, to understand why Yu Sui's catfishing message was like that, you have to understand that this, see below, is Yu Sui's mental image of Shi Luo. It's also necessary that you understand this so that you can understand why his messages in the next chapter sound the way they do. This is the berry love, shame-made family subculture in China. They're characterized by the outrageous hair and makeup. They're often viewed as less educated partly because a lot of them came from families of migrants from the provinces. Of course, a lot of them are young teenagers, so they're also kind of emo. You know, railing against the system, being angstfrei, stuff like that. So his messages to Shi Luo are kind of dramatic, emo sounding. In the original Chinese there were tons, like 90% of the message, was spelled wrong. I guess, to reflect the uneducated image people in this subculture have. I guess, the closest American equivalent would be emo punk. But of course, there are a lot of cultural differences. Chapter 10. Yu Sui had been waiting for Shi Luo to kowtow to him, and when he saw this rejection notification, he didn't know quite how to react. Did he just get rejected? It's been so long since someone rejected Whisper's friend request. Yu Sui looked at his rejected friend request and did some deep self-examination. Was it because he was not berry love enough? Yu Sui looked at Shi Luo's provocative and arrogant appearance in the live broadcast room, and felt that he might have been a little too conservative. This aristocratic brat must have turned his nose up at him. Yu Sui hated losing face and really didn't want to bother with this anymore. But he thought back to the care and consideration Kao had shown him when they were in school and thought about how his hardships this night would all come to nothing if he quit now. He gritted his teeth and proceeded to change his nickname and sent Shi Luo another friend request. Yu Sui made a guess based on experience. A kid like Shi Luo with 3 hoops around his ears, must have gone through some pretty tough things. He must have turned up his nose at something as mild as this. He needed to redouble his efforts. While in the middle of broadcasting, Shi Luo glanced at the friend request prompt at the lower left corner. He clicked it open. System prompt: Cruel bloody dream, sent you a friend request. The reason for applying: my deliberate provocation, how long can you endure? Accept or reject? Shi Luo. Shi Luo didn't want to endure it even for a second, and directly refused. But only half a minute later, a new friend request came in again. System prompt: heart breaks until numb, sent you a friend request. The reason for replying: hundreds and thousands of holes through the heart, no blood left to bleed, I'm already used to it, accept or reject? Shi Luo clicked reject once again, 10 seconds later. System prompt: living badly, sent you a friend request. The reason for replying: gambled, got drunk, hurt and got hurt for you before, I placed my bet and never regretted, accept or reject? Shi Luo quickly refused and then 10 seconds later. System prompt: for my brothers, sent you a friend request. The reason for replying: who would dare break my brother's wings? I will destroy his entire heaven, accept or reject? Shi Luo closed his eyes. His eyes stung. Shi Luo clicked on reject again, and started another match. He stopped looking at the system prompts and concentrated on playing this game. In the space, Yu Sui looked at the screen and frowned. This was totally unexpected. He had come across a hard stubble today. Why won't this kid accept his friend request? Could it be that he doesn't like this tone? Was this not hardcore enough? It wasn't that he couldn't make it even more moronic, but Yu Sui himself found it a little hard to endure. This was too f***ing stupid. Today, Yu Sui was supposed to be able to open a live broadcast and make his rounds. He thought about it and came to the conclusion that in order to successfully add this little bastard as a friend, he'll have to take some emergency measures. He completely abandoned his precious time this night. Yu Sui has been an esports star since he made his debut. In fact, he carried a heavy burden to maintain his image as an idol. There was absolutely no way he could ever let anyone know the black history of moronic things he'd gotten up to just now. But if doesn't manage to add him now, who knows when the little bastard will do a live broadcast next. If he lets go of him now, will he have to go door to door to search for him next time? What if he flees to and hides in the mukbang channel next time? Yu Sui cannot let the tiger return to the mountain. While Yu Sui was hesitating, he saw through the webcam that while the stand-in shield was loading, Shi Luo took out his phone, turned it on and made a call. Yu Sui raised an eyebrow. As expected, this little bastard hadn't opened his phone until just now. But who was he calling? Was he going to order takeout? If he was ordering food, he'd have to declare the address of the internet cafe. Yu Sui quickly turned up the volume of the live broadcast room, ready to write down Shi Luo's address to give to Kao. Yu Sui leaned over and took a pen from his neighbor's desk. He was preparing to write down the address for when Shi Luo's call connected, and he hadn't even found a piece of paper yet, when Shi Luo said coldly in the live broadcast, "Kao, is this as much as you can do? You posted my information on some sort of alternative dating forum and had a bunch of freaks come and harass me online? Huff. Did you think that would scare me?" Shi Luo, who was poised with paper and pen. Yu Sui said to himself, "Of course, you're not scared. You're one of them. You can't be any happier finding somewhere you finally belong. What have you got to be afraid of?" Before Yu Sui could put the pen and paper back, Kao's call finally came. Yu Sui had no choice and accepted the call. Kao was at a loss. "What have you done? Everything was going so well, and then my cousin suddenly called me and chewed me out. Yu Sui had a terrible headache. He picked up the cigarette case, lowered his head and picked one up with his lips. It's nothing. I wanted to add him as a friend to talk to him. Kao was even more confused. Then why'd he call to scold me? Yu Sui lit the cigarette. He found out that you were the one who asked me to find him. Oh. Kao couldn't help complaining. How did you get exposed so early? Can he still add you now that he knows we know each other? Yu Sui didn't want to bother telling Kao how hard he had worked all night. It'll take too long to tell you. I'm hanging up. I'll try again. Yu Sui didn't wait for Kao to say anything more and hung up. He accessed his side account once again and bought a rename card. Yu Sui found it troublesome to register a new account every time, so he only bought a rename card to change the nickname. One name change was worth 200 yuan. For one side account, Yu Sui had already spent more than 1,000 yuan tonight. Yu Sui looked at the live broadcast room, grinding his teeth. He was left with no choice but to follow Shi Luo's script. Yu Sui changed his nickname and signature, and once again sent a friend request to Shi Luo. In the internet cafe, Shi Luo had finished another match and continued to queue for another one. Looking at the flashing system prompt sign, Shi Luo sneered and opened it. System prompt: nervous about online dating? Sent you a friend request. The reason for replying: someone in the forum posted that I could get 10 yuan at a time for harassing you online. Little Jeej, I have no more money for breakfast tomorrow. Can I add you please? Brother, help me out, accept or reject? Shi Luo was preparing to hit reject when he suddenly paused. 10 yuan. Shi Luo had on a terrible expression as he looked at this friend request. His face was darker than the bottom of a pond. After half a minute of hesitation, Shi Luo clicked accept. Shi Luo clicked on the in-game chat box and with a cold expression on his face, sent a message to his newly added friend. Are you with those guys just now? There quickly came a reply. No way, I only bury love by myself. I haven't joined any family. Shi Luo's arm was itchy. Shi Luo resisted the strong urge to directly delete the other, typing, do what you want but don't disturb me. Nervous about online dating? Immediately responded. Okay. But Jeej, I also play this game. Can you take me with you to play a match? Shi Luo typed out, no nervous about online dating. Added, then, can you add me on WeChat, Jeej? I'll wait until you have time to take me with you to play a game. Shi Luo suppressed his ire. He hesitated for a full minute before typing out a series of numbers. With a ding, he got a friend request on WeChat. Shi Luo quickly closed the in-game chat interface and focused on playing the game. In the space, Yu Sui also swallowed down his disgust as he looked at his side account and his newly changed WeChat name. He suppressed his anger and called back Kao. I've been added as his friend in the game. When I have time, I'll play a round or two with him to see. It's impossible right now. Yu Sui was exhausted physically and mentally. He's also added me on WeChat. I'll keep an eye on him for you. If there's something really important and your family can't get in touch with him, I can send him a message for you guys. Does he have a place to live? Kao quickly thanked him. Thank you very much. Thanks your thoughtfulness. Where he lives? I don't know. Yu Sui laughed. Is he really your cousin? He's a student who ran away from home, doing live broadcasts in some seedy internet cafe, and you're not worried that he has nowhere to live? What if he's sleeping under some bridge? Sigh, don't worry. Kao said, he's been running away from home since he was 13 or 14. At first, everyone in our family was also sent out to search for him. This happens several times a year, until things got to how they are now. He himself is used to it and his family is also used to it. Yu Sui frowned. They've been quarreling since he was a child? Does he have some sort of grudge? Kao sighed. In any case, he has his own pocket money, He must have somewhere to live. As for the other things, it's a long story. Yu Sui had no interest in listening. He said, let's leave things here for now. This is all because I owe you for back then. After I've confirmed whether he can cut it as a pro, I'll delete him. I have no time to be looking after kids for you. How quickly said, of course, of course. Yu Sui hung up the phone and glanced at Shi Luo's live broadcast room. Shi Luo had already ended the broadcast. Yu Sui rubbed his tired eyes, and his phone rang again. Ji Yanhan was calling. Yu Sui leaned back on his gaming chair and spread his long legs. He said lazily, Captain. Just finished with my business dinner. Ji Yanhan smiled and said, how's your search for that anchor? I'm free now. Need me to look for someone to do a professional search? Yu Sui shook his head. No, I handled it myself. Ji Yanhan had drank a lot, and it was quite talkative. Tell me, who's this amazing player you've taken an interest in? What job does he play? Yu Sui said, it has nothing to do with me. He plays a medic. Ji Yanhan laughed, well, does he play well? Yu Sui frowned, passable. Ji Yanhan said, what does that mean? Better than you? The corner of Yu Sui's mouth raised slightly. He smiled and said nothing. Ji Yanhan also laughed, I am talking nonsense. But even if he's not as good as you, maybe he can be recruited, to be a substitute for you. Yu Sui raised his eyebrows. Did you drink too much? Our team has always never been the tightly knit type. If you're able to play, then you're on the starting lineup. If you suck, then you're gone. We don't even have a second team. Since when have we been able to afford this luxurious thing called a substitute? No one else can have one, but you can. Ji Yanhan said half seriously and half jokingly, how about it? Find a substitute for you. That way you can have more time to slowly take over the team's affairs. This really is getting to be a little bit too much for me. So, help me out? Yu Sui didn't even think about it. Impossible. Ji Yanhan said again, do you really not want a substitute? Yu Sui simply said, no need, so long as my hands don't stop, I'll play. Ji Yanhan laughed, okay, I'll listen to you. If you're not willing, then that's that. Hey, that's right. Haven't I sent you the regular season match schedule yet? Yu Sui said, no, I'm an idiot. Ji Yanhan patted his forehead fiercely. Blame me, blame me, blame me. Your manager recently asked for a leave. He sent me the schedule the day before yesterday. I've been so busy recently, I totally forgot. Yu Sui frowned. It's all my fault. Ji Yanhan apologized quickly. I'm so tired these days. I'll send it to you on WeChat right away. Yu Sui said helplessly, send it to me. I'll handle the logistics for you. I'll have them arrange the details early. Yu Sui hung up the phone and was about to order a takeaway when Ji Yanhan called again. Yu Sui answered the phone. Ji Yanhan was confused and said, oh, my eyes are getting a bit blurry. Why can't I find you on WeChat? Did you delete me? Yu Sui was irritable. How much have you had to drink? Ji Yanhan hurriedly apologized, sorry. It's my fault. Yu Sui said, I'll send you a message on WeChat and you can just reply back. Ji Yanhan knew that he was in the wrong and said, okay. Yu Sui hung up the phone and sent a message over on WeChat. A few thousand kilometers away, Ji Yanhan, completely hammered, stood in the center of the Willet hotel lobby, squinting and holding his mobile phone, solemnly waiting. After half a minute, his mobile phone buzzed, nervous about online dating. The schedule, quickly. Hi. This is Novel Admire. Thanks for the visit. Come back again for more novels.